Everything is too easy after maxing my talents. Chapter 726, There's no need to be sad about parting. 2. As long as he cut out a small portion of this large mass of spiritual energy, if it appeared in the main material world, it would probably be snatched by countless spiritual and telekinesis reincarnators. Even cultivators who specialized in individual power couldn't help but feel envious. It was not an exaggeration to say that it would cause countless people to go crazy. But now, Li Yueming had only extorted a large sum of money. If people knew about this, who knew how many pairs of red eyes would appear in the world? He carefully kept this ball of extremely pure spiritual energy. Li Yueming was not in a hurry to absorb it. After all, he wasn't fully aware of the world's consciousness's methods. No one could guarantee that the world's consciousness of the returning heart great land hadn't tampered with this ball of energy. The safest thing to do was to keep it safe and wait for the right time to find a place to slowly absorb it. He refined the spiritual energy he absorbed a few more times. He wanted it to fuse with him completely, leaving no hidden dangers behind. He was waiting for Zhao Hechuan to save him. The number of heart spirit readers gathering outside the 18 levels of purgatory was increasing. From a dozen at the beginning to hundreds later on. From the last few hundred to the last few thousand. At the same time, the realm of the spiritual master was getting higher and higher. Obviously, the turmoil in the imperial prison had caused a huge commotion in the city of Heart. All the heart spirit readers wanted to see just who had the guts to step into the Heart City's prison in broad daylight to save someone. Hence, it was under such circumstances. Li Yueming brought his parents, sister, and friends out of the imperial prison. The surrounding heart spirit readers who had surrounded the prison couldn't help but widen their eyes. He looked at Li Yueming as if he had seen a ghost. What did they see? The man in front of him had broken into the prison of the City of Heart, but he had actually walked out with all four limbs intact. Not only did he walk out with all four limbs intact, he even brought out the heretics from the 18th level of the imperial prison. Didn't this mean that the person in front of him had fought his way from the first level of the imperial prison to the lowest level? The terror of the imperial prison was already beyond anyone's doubt. Back then, the heart spirit readers of the returning heart mainland had created the prison of the City of Heart to imprison heretics. After so many years, the number of heretics among the cultivators had decreased. However, the Heaven prison in Heart City had never lowered its defense level. Under normal circumstances, how could anyone break into the lowest level? But now, regardless of whether they were willing to believe it or not, the truth had long been placed in front of them. Under such circumstances, an even more shocking scene appeared. Li Yueming took a few steps forward, and the aggressive group of heart spirit readers outside the prison took a few steps back. For a moment, no one dared to compete with Li Yueming. After Li Yueming walked out of the prison, he looked around and found that there were still 2 or 3 cats and puppies in his sight. He completely lost his interest in attacking. Li Yueming ignored the ghost-like gazes around him and waved at the people behind him. Get ready to set off. In the future, you might have the chance to return to this boring world. As he spoke, Li Yueming crushed the space-time anchor power given to him by the world consciousness of 9 regions before coming here. According to the expectation of the world consciousness of 9 regions, this thing should be the foundation for all civilizations to embark on interstellar travel. As long as you crushed it, you could temporarily see through the fog of the universe that covered everything and sense the star that belonged to you alone in the vast sea of stars. Northern Ice River Calendar, Year 43. Amidst the cold wind and snow, Li Yueming, who had disappeared for 2 years, finally returned to the familiar place with the descendants of the cultivators from the returning heartland. The Northern Ice River was flowing as usual, but the Northern Ice River town, which was built on both sides of the Northern Ice River, was wrapped in a thick layer of winter clothing. Li Yueming's quiet appearance was not known to the outside world. In fact, ever since he resigned from his position as the Star Moon Army's general, Li Yueming had never appeared in front of the world for so many years. He waited silently for a while. Meanwhile, Zhao Hechuan and the others were already shocked by the huge city in front of them. At this moment, all of them looked like country bumpkins who had never seen the world. After a while, the world consciousness finally appeared in front of Li Yueming. Li Yueming made way for him. "I've brought back the person you wanted. When will you let me study the Book of Changes?" The world consciousness projection scanned the few of them with its sharp eyes for a long time before sighing, "Sigh." It seemed that the continuation of the Book of Changes was really cut off. Alas! Li Yueming's eyes immediately narrowed. Previously, when the illusionary body of the world's consciousness asked him to go to the small world to look for the cultivators who had been lost outside, he had been shocked. He had already felt puzzled. However, because the world consciousness illusion promised him a generous reward, he did not delve into the matter. Now that Li Yueming heard the world consciousness's sigh, he finally knew what this guy was hiding from him. Chapter 727, There's no need to be sad about parting. 3. Fortunately, the illusionary world consciousness did not intend to go back on its word. After glancing at Zhao Hechuan and the others behind him, the world consciousness explained, "Of course. I have kept a copy of the entire book of the Book of Changes. The only pity is that the continuation of the book, which was used to study the Zerg race, was lost. I wonder if it was wiped clean by the Zerg race's supreme master back then." As he spoke, a ripple appeared in the space in front of Li Yueming. He reached out and a book appeared in his hand. Seeing him take the Book of Changes, the world consciousness continued, "They also cultivate the Book of Changes, so let them become your disciples. I think that the cultivation theory you've researched is quite interesting. If it can be combined with the original path of cultivators, it might be able to give birth to an even more magnificent path." Regarding this, Li Yueming did not deny it. To be honest, the path created by the reincarnators could change the world's consciousness's development towards the ideal system. This meant that the Dao path had already been strengthened and perfected to a certain extent. Otherwise, the world consciousness, which had lived longer than any old monster, would never have shown such a state. After getting the Book of Changes, Li Yueming didn't continue chatting with the illusionary world consciousness. After thinking for a while, he sent a divine sense to Zhao Hechuan and sent them to northern Ice River Town. This divine sense contained a simple message. As long as Zhao Changhe and the others entered North Glacier Town, they would attract the attention of Li Ruyu and Li Ruxing. They would naturally arrange for them, so Li Yueming did not have to worry. After finishing all of this, Li Yueming did not stop. He returned to the valley of the extremely cold snow mountain where the little fox lived and began to enter seclusion to comprehend the entire Book of Changes and digest the mental power he brought back from the heart-returning mainland. Many years passed in the blink of an eye. Northern Ice River Calendar, Year 50. The old man's face became fewer and fewer, replaced by a vibrant face. Logically speaking, the originally withered world was becoming more and more prosperous. However, whether it was Northern Ice River Town or the entire world, they could still feel a lingering sense of desolation and withering. It was because the number of people who had experienced that starry era of chaos was decreasing. When the Star Moon dynasty had just destroyed the 6 countries, traces of reincarnators could occasionally be seen in 9 regions. However, as time passed, the reincarnators who were originally active on the stage of the 6 nations also quietly disappeared from sight. It could be said that the current prosperity of 9 regions belonged to the Star Moon dynasty and the young people. Those who were still stuck in the era of the 6 nations could only feel endless sorrow. An era is coming to an end, and another era is coming. The gears of fate slowly drive by, some people full of longing, childish, some people full of dust, 2 temples like frost. However, all of this seemed to have nothing to do with Li Yueming. In the depths of the extremely cold snow mountain, Li Yueming opened his eyes and closed the Book of Changes in front of him. He silently stood up and looked to the south. He seemed to be able to see the outline of northern glacier town through the mountains and rivers that were nearly 10,000 miles away. All good things must come to an end. He had stayed in this world for far too long, and it was only a matter of time before it came to an end. And now, he had finished absorbing the spiritual power and understood the entire book of changes. There was no longer any reason for him to stay in this world. Instead of wasting time, it was better to leave as soon as possible. He stared at it for a long time. Li Yueming sighed and said to himself, I came silently and left silently. I hope that all of you will be safe and sound. I won't be bidding farewell. Goodbye. As he spoke, he did not hesitate anymore. He raised his arm and opened the reincarnation mark. At the same time, in the distant northern glacier town, Li Yueming, who was meditating, suddenly shed 2 streams of tears. As her tears fell, her already thin figure became even thinner. After sobbing silently for a moment, she muttered, See you in the next life, little brother. Li Ruyu, who was still sweeping the snow and fallen leaves in the courtyard, also stopped what she was doing. He raised his eyes and looked towards the north, stunned. Although Li Yueming had never said goodbye to her formally, she was still very happy. However, when the wind blew, it blew away the fallen leaves and snow, as well as the unbreakable bond and longing between them. This feeling didn't need words to express. In this world, the real parting would never be by the side of the ancient road outside the pavilion. It was often just a casual turn. Chapter 728, Return to the reincarnation space and become rich overnight. 1. Detected that the Chosen One is trying to leave the public reincarnation dungeon. Please confirm whether to return to the reincarnation space. Yes/no. Without hesitation, Li Yueming closed his eyes and chose to confirm. This simulated reincarnation has ended. Returning to the reincarnation space. A bright light flashed. The familiar sense of weightlessness suddenly came again. Li Yueming felt that his thoughts had left his body. He crossed endless time and space and returned to a quiet place. After an unknown amount of time. When he came back to his senses and opened his eyes again, the endless glaciers of the extremely cold snow mountain had already disappeared. The space that appeared in front of him became a familiar white space. Welcome back to the reincarnation space. The score is being calculated. You have been successfully reincarnated in this time. You have been alive for 122 years. Your fate has changed greatly. Base score increased from D to C. Reward, 10,000 reincarnation points. This reward was the most basic rating reward. Under normal circumstances, Li Yueming should have died at the age of 12 in this life. However, Li Yueming had used various means to extend his lifespan by more than 100 years. Under this premise, the system's reward of reincarnation points was quite generous. In this reincarnation, you have changed the fate of the destined son, Wang Ziwei. Mark score increased from C to B. Reward, 20,000 reincarnation points. This rating reward was also quite normal. If it were to develop according to the normal world line, the one chosen by the world consciousness to destroy the Great Zhou and launch the reform should be the prince who was taking advantage of his master. However, because Li Yueming's performance was too eye-catching, even the light of the Sun of Destiny was snatched by Li Yueming. This led to the fate of the entire 9 regions to be actively poured into Li Yueming. Wang Ziwei had also escaped from the Sea of Suffering. After Li Yueming destroyed the Great Zhou dynasty, he had escaped from fate. Destroying the Great Zhou and changing Wang Ziwei's fate was a huge project. There should be a follow-up settlement for the public reincarnation dungeon. The current settlement was only the settlement for the normal dungeon process. The reward of 20,000 reincarnation points was already considered very low. You overthrew the 6 nations in this reincarnation, and in the turbulent war that followed, you were unstoppable, establishing a vibrant and unified country. Mark score increased from B to A+. Reward, 80,000 reincarnation points. The reward for unifying the 6 states was also average. However, Li Yueming didn't feel anything about it. After all, this was only a regular dungeon reward, a dessert before the main course. The real public reincarnation dungeon reward was still to come. You have broken through the Nirvana realm and successfully reached the Ascension realm. You have broken the ancient conspiracy and promoted the cultivation system of the human body treasure. You have changed the originally twisted power system of World 7-21741. Mark score increased from A and to S+. Reward, 130,000 reincarnation points. Your achievements will be revered by the people of Planet 7 to 21,741. As long as the fire of civilization on Planet 7 to 21,741 is not extinguished, your incense will continue to burn and will be praised by the people for generations. Your name has been passed down through the ages, and hundreds of millions of people in 9 regions call you Star Moon Emperor. Mark score increased from S and to SS+. Reward, 180,000 reincarnation points. You have unlocked the Interstellar Traveler achievement in this reincarnation. Mark score increased from SS and to SSS. Reward, 200,000 reincarnation points. Current reincarnation settlement rating, SSS. Reward calculation completed, you have obtained 13 additional reincarnation rights, 620000 reincarnation points SSS grade reincarnation power return, 11,000 reincarnator experience, fixed number of talents x3, and the only special title, Star Moon Emperor. Planet No 7 to 21,741 is very satisfied with your performance during your work period and has given you full marks. We sincerely invite you to come home often in the future. Regular dungeon reward settlement completed, distributing. The reward has been distributed. Host, please check it yourself. Lines of information appeared in front of Li Yueming's eyes. Under normal circumstances, these rewards alone were enough to suffocate countless reincarnators. But for Li Yueming, this was just the beginning of the reward. The real highlight was yet to come. Detected that the host has entered a public reincarnation dungeon. The regular dungeon has been settled. The special dungeon reward is being settled. The starting level of the public reincarnation dungeon is LV5. Initial reward value increased by 50%. Host's mission completion status is as follows. Main mission, 1. Choose a good master and sweep the world. Mission requirements, choose a suzerain country from the Tang, Ming, Qin, Han, Song, and Zhou dynasties and help it unify the world. Mission bonus, the more effort you put into destroying the country, the more generous the mission reward. Mission completion progress, 50%, the host did not choose the mother country for this mission, so the reward will be halved. The rewards are as follows, 40,000 plus 20,000 reincarnation points, 2 plus 1 additional reincarnations. Additional 50% reward in LV5 world. Main mission, 2. Hold the sun and moon in your hands and pluck the stars. There is no one like me in the world. Mission requirement, break through to the realm of the spirit focus. Mission bonus points, when the reincarnator returns to the reincarnation space, the higher the realm, the more generous the mission reward. Mission completion progress, 100%, peak level, above ascension. Chapter 729, Return to the reincarnation space and become rich overnight. 2. Main mission, 3. A real man is born in the world. How can he be depressed and live under others for a long time? Mission requirements, set up a country and unify the world. Mission bonus points, the stronger the country, the richer the people, the faster the unification of the world, and the more generous the mission rewards. Mission completion progress, 100%, founding the Star Moon Dynasty, unifying the 6 countries for more than 10 years, the people are rich, and the country is prosperous. The rewards are as follows, 200,000 plus 100,000 reincarnation points, 5 plus 2 additional reincarnations, Random talent draw scroll x1, fixed talent number x2. Additional 50% reward in LV5 world. Main mission, 4 killing God. Mission requirements, eliminate 30 other reincarnators. Mission bonus, the more reincarnators you kill, the stronger you are, and the more generous the mission reward. Mission completion progress, 100%, personally kill 55 reincarnators. The rewards are as follows: 100,000 plus 50,000 reincarnation points, 3 plus 2 additional reincarnations. Additional 50% reward in LV5 world. These were the additional rewards provided by the public reincarnation dungeon. It was much more than the basic resources rewarded in normal dungeons. Of course, these rewards were all universal. The place where the real good things came from was still at the back. It could only be said that completing too many missions was also a painful annoyance. There were too many treasures in this settlement, and for a moment, it actually gave him a somewhat unreal illusion. The main mission has been completed. The hidden mission is being completed. Hidden mission, 1. Help Wang Ziwei overthrow the Zhou dynasty. Mission requirements, overthrow the Zhou dynasty. Mission bonus points, the faster and more thorough the overthrow, the higher the reward. Mission completion progress, 100%, after spending decades, I finally managed to defy the heavens. The rewards are as follows: 100,000 plus 50,000 reincarnation points, 3 plus 2 additional reincarnations, the complete version of the only scripture, the Book of Changes *1. Hidden mission, 2. Find the truth, touch the truth, and unravel the truth. Quest requirement, $% number. Additional mission points, asterisk and $% number, and amp, %UN number. Mission completion progress, 100%, if you want to pursue the truth, you have to have courage and brains that ordinary people don't have. Congratulations on successfully passing our test. After understanding the truth, you are only one step away from the truth. The rewards are as follows: Reincarnation Mark Authority. From now on, when you use the Reincarnation Mark, you can obtain a higher level of visitor authority. You can also obtain additional services including but not limited to more information about the reincarnation world, richer descriptions of the world's background, and more. Hidden mission, 3. Search for the descendants of cultivators in the small world. Mission requirements, go to the small world outside 9 regions and find the descendants of cultivators left behind in the ancient Great Jian dynasty. Mission bonus points, the shorter the search time, the more people search, the richer the reward. Mission completion progress, 00%, after several months, 12 people have been found. Mission reward, unique special title Heart Spirit Master, a book of the Book of Changes. He counted all the rewards. Even though Li Yueming was already mentally prepared, he still couldn't help but feel a little speechless when he saw so many rewards. This public reincarnation instance dungeon took a long time. Even Li Yueming spent more than half of his time carefully walking on a tightrope. One could imagine how much effort he had put in. But now, it seemed like everything was worth it. At the very least, the rewards from this public reincarnation instance dungeon were more than the rewards from the 2 normal instance dungeons. As expected, the reincarnation mark was very fair. It would not mistreat any honest person. Li Yueming was a little excited. Even his lips unconsciously curled up. After careful calculation, he had obtained a total of 1,430,000 reincarnation points, 38 additional reincarnations, and 5 talent fixed times. There were even 2 unique titles. Star Moon Emperor, Gold. Although you haven't set foot in the universe, your fame has already spread throughout the universe. The power known as the Star Moon has emerged from a world and gradually formed a huge wave in the universe. As the creator of the wave, you will receive unparalleled prestige. Unique special effect, all attributes increased by 50%, command increased by 500, personal charm increased by 120, deterrence against special forces increased. Heart Spirit Reader, Red. Even though you are still an immature spiritual force user, you have obtained the origin spiritual force and have the special characteristics of this group. Unique special effect: increase spiritual power by 80%, increase basic spiritual attribute by 100%, increase spiritual attribute control by 50%. The bonus of the 2 additional talents was beyond Li Yueming's imagination. This was especially true for the special golden talent, Star Moon Emperor. All attributes increased by 50%, Commander's strength increased by 500, and there was also an extremely high additional charm bonus. It was actually higher than the bonus of the title of Starlight Preacher obtained in the previous world. In addition to the red talent of Heart Spirit Reader, which was icing on the cake. This wave was really a huge profit. Suppressing the joy in his heart, Li Yueming began to absorb the SSS level energy return. This time, the reincarnation world was a fantasy world with a high proportion of individual power. He wondered how much power the SSS rank reversal could give him. If the mark of reincarnation was made from that mysterious universe treasure, it was the ultimate method to interfere with the past from the future. Then the reincarnation mark should not be too stingy with him. Li Yueming slowly sat cross-legged and took a few deep breaths. After adjusting his mood, he said, "Reincarnation imprint, begin the return of power." Ding! Power return activated. The reincarnator's power return is SSS. The reincarnator world serial number is 7-21. Power returning. Detected that the host has advanced authority. Power return increased. After he finished speaking. Before Li Yueming could react to what was meant by an increase in the strength of the return. In the next second, an incomparable pain that pierced through his bones appeared in his body. Li Yueming shivered. The mental preparation he had made was almost broken. It hurt, it was too painful. If the pain caused by the reincarnation mark returning power last time was from all over his body, then the pain would be too much. Then the pain brought by the return of power was mental and physical. Physical damage was pure physical damage. A pure mental attack was magic damage. The physical and mental pain together was a real injury. Li Yueming knew that the system was forging to strengthen his body and spirit. Therefore, even if it was really painful, he still held on and did not say anything. Time passed by slowly. He didn't know how much time had passed. Finally, the pain in his body and soul gradually subsided, turning into a warm current that flowed continuously in his body. After silently sensing for a moment, Li Yueming quickly opened his personal interface and glanced at it. Name: Li Yueming, Permanent Reincarnator. Reincarnation number: 700-1611. Mark of Reincarnation level: LV4, 20500/30,000. Reincarnation points balance: 163,4105. Origin power: 100 times talent enhancement. Fixed talents: infinite deduction, gold, perfect genetic body, shiny gold. Bound unique titles: God of Martial Arts, red; Starlight Preacher, red; Heart Spirit Reader, red; Star Moon Emperor, gold. Fixed talent: 3. Fixed number of talents: 6. Additional reincarnations: 40. After making sure that all his gains were accurate, Li Yueming stood up and stretched his body. His eyes were filled with joy. It was unknown if it was because the reincarnation mark had been upgraded or for some other reason, but the power returned by the reincarnation mark this time was also more than expected. The harvest from this trip was really too good. Chapter 730, Public Dungeon Rankings. 1. After counting the spoils of war from this public reincarnation instance dungeon, Li Yueming slowly stood up from the white reincarnation space. This reincarnation took a long time, and he did not know how much time had passed outside. Thinking of this, Li Yueming raised his arm and opened the reincarnation mark. He was about to enter the chat channel to see the situation of the reincarnators who participated in this reincarnation instance dungeon. However, just as he entered the reincarnator forum and did not even have the time to read the post, a very eye-catching message suddenly popped up from the reincarnation mark. Ding! It has been detected that you have passed our first test. The authority of the reincarnation space has been increased. EEOE.cm. Name: Li Yueming, Permanent Reincarnator. Reincarnation number: 700-1611. Reincarnation mark authority: Senior Administrator, 1/1. Detected that the energy of the reincarnation mark has been accumulated, and the number of people who have passed our assessment has reached the estimated number. The ultimate assessment has been initiated. You will enter the next special reincarnation dungeon in 3 months. Please prepare to leave the reincarnation world in advance. Ding! You are the only senior administrator of the reincarnation mark. You have the ability to appoint/remove the use of the reincarnation mark of ordinary administrators, muted administrators/reincarnators, and banned administrators/ordinary reincarnators 5 times a month. In addition, you have already entered the internal group chats of the reincarnation mark administrator. If you have any questions, please ask in the group chat. The low-level administrator has the responsibility to report the information to you. A series of messages appeared. At first, Li Yueming thought that it was some rubbish advertisement. After all, nowadays, only junk advertisements would pop up in the form of pop-ups. In the end, he did not expect that his authority as the only group leader had arrived. Li Yueming was dumbfounded when he saw the description of the various functions of this so-called authority. Good heavens! Reincarnation mark is the only administrator. Did this identity want him to fly into the sky? No wonder the previous level 5 world suddenly increased the difficulty to level 9. In the end, when the final reward was the reincarnation mark, it did not give him an extra hair. It turned out that the most shameless reward was this so-called reincarnation mark authority. With this thing, he was a supreme existence to ordinary reincarnators. If anyone dared to bully him, he could directly delete the blacklist and ban them. This was simply unacceptable to the reincarnators. After all, everything they had came from the reincarnation mark. Once he provoked Li Yueming, he might not even be able to enter the reincarnation world. The so-called authority dog was nothing more than this. After thinking for a while, Li Yueming didn't have the authority to continue researching. After all, what he wanted to know the most was the situation in the outside world. It wouldn't be a waste of time to study the authority later. He closed the pop-up window. Li Yueming finally saw the reincarnator forum that he hadn't seen for a long time. At this moment, the headline of the most popular article was very eye-catching. Woe de fa, did the public reincarnation instance this time get broken by a fierce person? With a bit of doubt, Li Yueming's mind moved and he directly entered the post to see what had happened. In the end, the first screenshot after he entered the post gave him a shock. Ranking of the total points for this public reincarnation dungeon. Rank 10, Reincarnation number 408-1619. Total points, 83,441. Rank 9, Reincarnation number 271-6414. Total points, 84,170. Rank 8, Reincarnation number 221-5624. Total points, 86,443. Rank 3, Reincarnation number 428-6415. Total points, 126,011. Rank 2, Reincarnation number 410,118. Total points 151147. Rank 1, Reincarnation number 700-1611. Total points, 857,784. Looking at this screenshot, the numbers in front were extremely unfamiliar to Li Yueming. However, Li Yueming was very familiar with the last number. What happened? Wasn't it his reincarnation mark number? Li Yueming was stunned, and then he suddenly remembered that before the public reincarnation instance dungeon had started, Huang Li and the others seemed to have mentioned that there was a so-called point ranking after the public reincarnation instance dungeon ended. So he was on the leaderboard, and he was the glorious first? To be honest, Li Yueming was a little confused. Wouldn't his identity be exposed if this ranking was released? After all, although strangers could not see his reincarnation mark ID, friends who had added each other's IDs could. Now, his ID was hanging high on the top of the leaderboard. It was unknown how many people had gathered here. If they were unlucky enough to be recognized by their friends, they might be turned upside down in the blink of an eye. And even if he wasn't recognized by his friends, the Reincarnators Association had registered the ID of a reincarnator. Although this thing was called a top secret. However, to some existences, it might not be a top secret. Fortunately, the reincarnation mark in the reward for this reincarnation gave him the sole authority to manage it. Coupled with the additional SSS level power return, Li Yueming now had enough self-protection ability, and he was not afraid of the outside world. Otherwise, who knew what the consequences would be? He slid down to take a look. The replies of the many reincarnators almost caused the post to explode. Chapter 731, Public Dungeon Rankings. 2. Unrivaled Lonely King, this first place is really freakish. 850,000 points. What is it for? No underwear, you guys only pay attention to the points, but no one pays attention to the IDs. Those with IDs starting with 2 or 3 were all the most experienced reincarnators. Under normal circumstances, they should have taken the top 3, but now, both the second and third place started with a 4. The first place was even more ridiculous. It actually started with a 7? If I remember correctly, the reincarnators with IDs starting with 7 should not have awakened for more than 3 years, right? Enlightened Ming said, that's right. The reincarnators who start with 7 should not have awakened for long. If they have not awakened for more than 3 years, they should still be newcomers. In the end, they actually popped a bunch of big shots on the public reincarnation rankings. Strange things happened every year, but there were especially many this year. Today was a good day to learn. So who can tell us what happened to this public reincarnation instance dungeon? Such a huge difference in points and rankings should not be an individual matter, right? There should be reincarnators who would notice something amiss. There are a few familiar IDs among the 5th to 10th. They should be the big shots who often farm public reincarnation dungeons. As for the top 5, most of them are unfamiliar. Neza isn't Ja, is there anyone who can come out and answer me? Every time a public reincarnation instance dungeon was opened, it was basically the topic that many participants paid the most attention to in the short term. And now, the reincarnators had basically returned from it. It was unknown how many people were like Li Yueming. The first thing they did when they came out was to enter the reincarnator forum to see what was happening in the outside world. Therefore, one could imagine how dazzling this post was. In the beginning, Li Yueming only felt a chill down Go's anus. But now, he had already regained his senses. It had already happened anyway, and he didn't have a time machine to change the past. Instead of being afraid, it was better to pretend that nothing had happened. Even if someone really came looking for him, he would at most not admit it. If there were still people who were blind and wanted to find trouble, he did not mind letting them taste the consequences. He closed the post after scanning through it. Li Yueming directly found the points store in the reincarnation mark to check the public dungeon. Only then did he realize that there were many good things inside. There were a lot of cultivation techniques and weapons. There were also items in the reincarnation world such as the chance to draw the reincarnation talent and the golden spoon that could be exchanged with points. As for the price, the points of the public reincarnation dungeon were about the same as the reincarnation points. It was just that there were no reincarnation points that could be used and could not be traded. In other words, more than 800,000 points were equivalent to more than 800,000 reincarnation points. Moreover, it was a reincarnation point that could be used to exchange for all kinds of common items in the main material plane. One had to know that this was only the reward from entering the public reincarnation dungeon. Moreover, it was independent of the other rewards. This was a huge windfall for Li Yueming. After scanning the area, Li Yueming spent more than 300,000 points to buy a few cultivation techniques to deduce. When he was about to leave, only then did he realize that there was another colorful item at the end of the public reincarnation dungeon store. Broken world origin. The source of a world's destruction can be used to accelerate the growth of a world that has already formed. It can also be used to create a blurry and chaotic broken world. Points required for exchange: 1 million, 50% discount for activating the sole administrator authority. What are you still hesitating about? Hurry up and pack it up. He looked at the broken world's source of consciousness. Li Yueming was stunned. If he remembered correctly, the hazy consciousness of the world consciousness fragment often told him that he needed to devour the world's origin. But at that time, Li Yueming had always thought that the source of the world was too far away from him. Unexpectedly, one of them actually appeared in the public reincarnation dungeon point store this time. Although it was not the complete world's origin. However, the price was touching. A 50% discount for 1 million points would be exactly 500,000. To be honest, this value made Li Yueming feel a faint malice. If he didn't know that the consciousness of the reincarnation world wouldn't cheat him, Li Yueming would have suspected that this guy had calculated it well and was ready to empty his family's assets in one go. If the infinite deduction and the star moon art were bottomless pits, then the world consciousness fragment hiding in his body was definitely another bottomless pit that could not be filled. Forget it. He had just earned a large sum in the public reincarnation dungeon. He was still relatively well off now. No matter how hard it was, she could not let the child suffer. He could only hope that this time, he would be able to hear the sound of the world fragment when he smashed a broken world origin into it. Otherwise, he wouldn't do this kind of business that was always losing money. Thinking of this, Li Yueming did not hesitate anymore. He gritted his teeth and bought the broken world origin. After spending all 500,000 points, Li Yueming opened his backpack and saw that the broken world origin was placed inside. He then heaved a sigh of relief. Next, he would go and see if any information about him had been found in the group chats of the Yunduan Fenjai. After all, no matter what, he had to be prepared. He opened the group chats. However, the group chat was as lively as ever. Qin Rishan, at all members, I got an A-grade rating for this public reincarnation instance. Scumbags, who can fight me? Ho Ping Ian, points? Are you on the rankings? Normally, I would be able to rank in the top 100 with an A-grade score, but in this public instance dungeon, it's a far cry. I would probably rank in the top 400 to 500 at most. Qian Fengtian said, it's over 800,000 points. And it was an ID that started with 7. Where did such a pervert come from? Wang Linlin was speechless. Wang Linlin was speechless. Linlin, my rich wife Linlin. What's wrong with you? There were so many exclamation marks. Could it be that his relatives were here? Wang Linlin, Jining, go to hell. Forget it, I don't have time for you, you idiot. All members, guess what score I got this time? Qian Fengtian said, what's going on? Has old Linlin made a comeback? Could it be that he also got an A class? Qin Rishan said, damn, it can't be. It wasn't easy for me to get an A grade. Linlin, you can't steal my limelight at this critical moment. Ho Ping Ian, I think it's a good fight. I can let anyone show off, but I can't let Fenjai, that scoundrel, get what he wants. I'm guessing Class A too. If all of you think it's a Class A, then I'll make a bigger estimate. As the two at all members' command incantations spread in the group, the entire group chats became even more heated. After all, the public reincarnation dungeon could be considered the best benchmark for many reincarnators to measure each other's abilities. Now that it was time for everyone to return to the dungeon together, it was hard not to be lively. Wang Linlin kept everyone guessing about her score for the public reincarnation instance. Everyone in the group was also interested and gave their guesses. Finally, Qin Rishan couldn't help but take the initiative to at Wang Linlin in the group. Linlin, hurry up and tell me. If you keep me in suspense, I'll take your ID and check the rankings myself. Wang Linlin, ha ha ha, I got an SS score this time and ranked 3rd on the leaderboard. When Wang Linlin said that she had gotten an SS grade score and was ranked 3rd on the leaderboard, she was shocked. The originally lively group chats instantly quieted down. Almost everyone was stunned. Damn it! Did they not wake up from the reincarnation dungeon, or did the sun rise from the west today? Jining. Ho Ping-ian. Wang Linlin, SS? How was this possible? Are you joking with us? Chapter 732, Identity Exposed, So You Are Great General Li. 1. The originally lively group chats suddenly became deserted. Wang Linlin couldn't help but put her hands on her hips and laugh. Were you shocked? If you don't believe me, you can go and look at the rankings. I never lie. As soon as he said this, the group chats became even more deserted. He reckoned that the group of people might have all run to the rankings to check the authenticity. After a while, someone replied. I just checked it and found out that it's true. I'm already so tired from getting an A grade score. This was only obtained by a narrow escape and good luck. Linlin, quickly tell me how you got an SS grade score. Wang Linlin's SS rating had dealt the most blow to anyone. Qin Rishan should be ranked first. After all, he had risked his life this time, and it was not easy for him to get an A rating. He had thought that he would be able to pretend to be a good player in the group, but he did not expect that Wang Linlin, who had appeared out of nowhere, would steal his limelight. Now, it was not easy for him to recover from the heavy psychological blow. Qin Rishan wanted to know how Wang Linlin got such a high score. One had to know that this was a valuable experience. If it wasn't for the fact that everyone in the group was good friends who knew each other well. Outside, it was probably hard to even exchange for 1,000 gold coins. Wang Linlin didn't hide anything. After all, if she wanted to hide it, she wouldn't let the people in the group know. Letting the people in the group know naturally meant that they were ready to share their experience. Humph, I won't hide it from you guys. This time, I've reincarnated with a super thigh at Jining. Even though I think you're an idiot, you're right about one thing. As long as you hold on to someone's thigh, you'll be able to achieve a complete victory. She was obviously a little excited and quickly replied, actually, I didn't do anything special in this reincarnation dungeon. From the beginning to the end, I just followed behind a chosen one from a native world and kept winning. At this point, Wang Linlin suddenly calmed down a little. She finally realized that something was wrong. After recalling a few messages, he said, there really seems to be a problem. I shouldn't only have so many reincarnation points. Whoever takes away the reincarnation points and points that should belong to me, I'll lose them. He saw her muttering in the group. Everyone in the group looked at each other. Every time the public reincarnation dungeon opened, there were many different dungeons. Few people present were assigned to the same world, so they basically didn't know what Wang Linlin had experienced in the reincarnation world. But now, Wang Linlin's condition was so abnormal. She even complained that someone had stolen the score that should have been hers. If what she said was true, it would be huge news. The group of people in the group couldn't remain calm after hearing this. One by one, they popped up to watch and said, what happened? You're already ranked 3rd. Who else can snatch the points that belong to you? However, at this moment, Wang Linlin seemed to be possessed. He kept muttering in the group, "No, this shouldn't be." After a long while, only then did Wang Linlin suddenly wake up from a dream and shout in the group chats, "That's not right. F***ck, Great General Li is not a native. He's really a reincarnator. Jining. Ho Ping Ian. At Wang Linlin, what are you talking about? What Great General Li?" Rishan Qin said, "If someone wants to steal your points, I think it should be the mysterious big shot at the top of the rankings, right? Could it be that the big shot obtained over 800,000 points by plundering you?" The public reincarnation dungeon points rankings was clearly the hottest topic of discussion. The top 3 IDs attracted the attention of thousands of people. That's why, when Wang Linlin mentioned that the points were stolen, Qin Rishan first thought of the big boss who ranked first in the public reincarnation dungeon. Only that person could explain the logic behind it. However, Wang Linlin still didn't answer his question. After discovering that her points were wrong, she seemed to have fallen into some kind of trance and was almost indifferent to the information from the outside world. No wonder General Li knows us so well. I was very puzzled about this before, but if he is also a reincarnator, all of this makes sense. So, we, a group of reincarnators, ended up following another reincarnator. This is simply too unbelievable. He muttered to himself for a while. Wang Linlin closed the group chats and opened the public reincarnation dungeon leaderboard. Her clear and beautiful gaze was fixed on the ID ranked first on the rankings. When she saw it clearly again, Wang Linlin said in a daze, "The 800,000 points should be General Li." It was actually an ID that started with 7. Great General Li was simply terrifying. I wonder if the other reincarnators have discovered it now. However, no matter what, the 2 guys who were disguised as Ding Yi and Tian Liang should have discovered it. This reincarnation was simply too unforgettable for Wang Linlin. Chapter 733, Identity Exposed, So You Are Great General Li. 2. Although Li Yueming had been holding the fort, they did not suffer too much. However, it was still not easy to support each other to reach the end. They had thought that after returning to the reincarnation space, they and Great General Li would have to part ways and live their own lives. However, he never expected that General Li was also a reincarnator, and his ID started with 7. This discovery was enough to shock Wang Linlin's shallow understanding. She finally calmed down. However, more questions were thrown out. Who was this ID that started with 7? Could she still find it? In the reincarnation space, Li Yueming took in the chat records of the group of people. For a moment, he felt a little awkward. Originally, he had wanted to buy dozens of additional reincarnation rights in the group, but now he realized that he had come at a very bad time. However, it seemed that this matter could not be hidden even if he wanted to. After all, there were quite a few people in the group who were his friends. Although they had yet to associate him with the number 1 big brother, they would eventually be exposed. Instead of doing so, he might as well stand up and sell all the items he had accumulated. Coincidentally, Wang Linlin, who had gone to check the public reincarnation dungeon point rankings, also returned. She was still a little shocked and incredulous. The group of people in the group jumped out and couldn't wait to find out what happened to Wang Linlin. Wang Linlin gathered her emotions. Then, he briefly summarized what he had seen and heard in 9 regions. When he heard her talk about how she followed Li Yueming to establish the Star Moon dynasty and then destroyed the 6 nations with unstoppable momentum, many of the members in the group were so shocked that they were speechless. After all, many of these contents were beyond their understanding. Damn it! How ridiculous was this General Li Yueming to be able to achieve such a terrifying achievement in the level 5 public reincarnation dungeon. This could no longer be described as a genius. If one had to describe it, it could only be said to be cheating. One had to know that with their strength and experience, they had to be careful when entering some level 3 or even level 2 worlds. It was hard to imagine how a big shot like Li Ming, who was like a fish in water in a level 5 world, did it. The few of them were in a heated discussion. Li Yueming was not in a hurry. He waited until they were done with this before he sent a simple message in the group, you guys are having a good time chatting. Haha, I won't disturb you anymore. I just want to ask if there's anyone who needs additional reincarnation authority. I have what you need here. The price is negotiable. There were only about 10 people in Qin Rishan's group. They were basically very familiar with each other. Therefore, the relatively unfamiliar Li Yueming's profile picture was immediately noticed as soon as it appeared in the group. In an instant, he was surrounded by the gazes of the crowd. Qin Rishan at Moonstar, you're here. Why did you come so late? How was the harvest of this public reincarnation instance dungeon? Ho Ping Ian, the newbie boss, is still as simple and unadorned as ever. He's selling extra reincarnation rights right from the start. How's the newbie's score this time? Is it convenient to reveal? Of course, as a show of sincerity, I can first reveal that my reincarnation score is B grade, which is still acceptable to me. Qian Fengtian, at Moonstar, Big Boss is rich again. How much extra reincarnation authority did you earn? Just a few days ago, my old man was still complaining about the lack of additional reincarnation authority. I can take all the money you have according to the market price. Many people in the group responded. Li Yueming couldn't help but smile. The extra reincarnation authority was a hard currency, so he didn't have to worry about selling it. However, if it was through other channels, it would take a lot of effort to sell the reincarnation authority at such an efficient and high price. After entering the Maple Leaf group chats in the clouds, he didn't need to worry about this problem at all. This group of people were the descendants of the various reincarnators' families. They all had quite a large force behind them and had the support of their families. After obtaining the additional reincarnations, he could directly trade them here. It saved time and effort. Of course, the main reason was that they had already made a few deals before. Li Yueming had a basic trust in this person. After thinking for a while, he did not directly say how many reincarnation privileges he had sold. After all, 30 to 40 additional reincarnation privileges were too scary. If he released them, it would probably cause a commotion. Therefore, he replied tactfully, "Young Master Fengtian, how many do you want? The number of reincarnations I have is not too many." Li Yueming did not reply directly. Qian Fengtian thought that Li Yueming had obtained too little extra reincarnation authority this time, so he couldn't help but laugh and say, "Of course, I'll accept as many additional reincarnation rights as the newbies have. Don't worry, although my family isn't considered a top-tier reincarnator family, I don't lack reincarnation points for additional reincarnation rights." He said it very casually. In fact, it is true. The reincarnator family valued the additional reincarnation authority very much. After all, extra reincarnation authority was equivalent to the spiritual energy of the Xiangxia world to reincarnators. It was the foundation of whether a reincarnator family was strong and prosperous. It was always a good thing to have more. Chapter 734, Identity Exposed, So You Are Great General Li. 3. After all, there were many reincarnators who sold other items these days, but people like Li Yueming who often sold additional reincarnation rights were as rare as giant pandas. Only Wang Linlin, who was still thinking about things, seemed to be a little uninterested. Li Yueming touched his chin and pondered for a moment. Last time, he only traded for 3 additional reincarnation rights. But this time, he had really made a fortune. He had a total of 40 additional reincarnation privileges. It was definitely impossible to release all of them. After all, it would not be beneficial for him to trade too many of these things at once. On the contrary, it might cause some unnecessary trouble. Therefore, he decided to take an average and try selling it 10 to 20 times. After all, things were different now. He already had the strength to establish himself in the prime material plane, and with the sole authority of the reincarnation mark, he wasn't afraid of people plotting against him. Therefore, he sent a message in the group chat, at Qian Fengtian, since that's the case, I'll sell you 10 extra reincarnation rights first. In fact, he was prepared to take out 20 additional reincarnation privileges. However, after all, the rarer an item was, the more valuable it was. If he took out too much, he would not be treated as worthless cabbage. It would not be a waste to wait for Qian Fengtian to buy it all before selling it. However, when he sent this amount to the group chats. However, the group chats went silent again, just like how Wang Linlin had said that she had obtained an SS rating. Obviously, the group of people was stunned by this number. Qian Fengtian typed out 2 words after a long while. How much? Qin Rishan was even more speechless for a long time. Finally, he asked weakly. If I remember correctly, the newbie just traded the extra reincarnations he had to Wang Linlin, right? You seem to remember correctly. Ho Ping Ian asked, so where did the newbie boss get so many extra reincarnation privileges? What gave me the illusion that the extra reincarnation authority was just a cabbage? The group of people were stunned. They all began to doubt their lives. What the hell was going on today? First, Wang Linlin, the crouching dragon, and then a cute new phoenix chick appeared in the group. Which reincarnation instance did these two go to rob? Even if he dug up all the dungeons, he might not be able to get 10 additional reincarnation privileges. However, Li Yueming really took out so many at once. Could it be that the additional reincarnation authority he had obtained from his previous reincarnations had not been sold out and he had left some behind? Together with his gains this time, he had gathered 10 additional reincarnation authority to be sold as a package? Yes, yes, yes. It should be like this. This was the only explanation. Qian Fengtian coughed a few times. Previously, he thought that Li Yueming would not have many additional reincarnation privileges, but he did not expect the newbie to be so generous. He couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Newbie boss, although I want to buy it with a wave of my hand, your reincarnation authority is too much at once. I don't have that many reincarnation points in my account. Please wait for me for a while. Qian Fengtian was in high spirits before, but now he was in a sorry state. Fortunately, Li Yueming was not in the mood to argue with him. He replied, "All right, I'll wait for your reply." The transaction was not completed yet. The few people in the group who came back to their senses were the first to explode. Jining, at Moonstar, this newbie boss is too awesome. Please write a secret manual. I'm willing to pay 1,000,000 reincarnation points to buy it. Qin Rishan, at Moonstar book, written in blood by 10,000 people, I want a secret manual. Ho Ping Ian, Wivu, I also want to make a fortune in the reincarnation instance dungeon. Although Li Yueming didn't tell them what score they got this time. However, there were some things that could be seen by others without saying much. There were some things that others would not care about even if you said it out loud. Li Yueming was obviously the former. To be able to continuously produce so many additional reincarnation privileges, Li Yueming's dungeon score was definitely not low. There was no need to say more. Therefore, the group of people did not hesitate to spend a lot of money to beg Li Yueming to give them a guide or experience to guide them. At this moment, only Wang Linlin wasn't in the crowd. She silently stared at Li Yueming's name in the group chats called Yuming Xingshu. Something seemed to explode in her mind. She had added Li Yueming as a friend before. Although he couldn't remember Li Yueming's complete reincarnator number, he vaguely remembered that Li Yueming's reincarnator number should start with 7. And now, there was the very recognizable group chat's name of Stars Moons. The answer seemed obvious. Chapter 735, Administrator, The Origin of Dark Energy. Yueming Xingshu, could it be that you? Could it be Great General Li? Wang Linlin sent a message. Instantly, the entire group chats fell silent again. No one expected Wang Linlin to say such a strange thing. At this moment, after being pointed out by Wang Linlin, Li Yueming could only pinch his nose and laugh, haha, I don't know who the great General Li you're talking about is, but if you're referring to Li Yueming, then it might be me. After hearing Li Yueming's reply, Wang Linlin was so excited that she almost stood up. Although she had already noticed that there was something wrong with Li Yueming's identity when she found out that the first place on the rankings was not hers or Ding Yi's group, it was still just a guess. The reason was that under normal circumstances, the establishment of the New Moon dynasty should have been due to the three of them. However, they did not receive the recognition of the reincarnation mark, and the points awarded were only calculated according to their assistants. In addition, there was the high and mighty ID on the public reincarnation dungeon leaderboard. She made this judgment because of the many factors that had caused her to be frightened. But now that she heard Li Yueming admit it, the shock and astonishment in Wang Linlin's heart were still indescribable. The new boss in the group was actually General Li Yueming, who was in the public reincarnation instance she was going to this time. No matter how much she dared to think about it. However, he still couldn't believe it when he realized this conclusion. Of course, Li Yueming ignored her. After waiting for a while, Qian Fengtian, who was at the reincarnation collection point, returned very quickly. The two of them quickly completed the transaction. 10 additional reincarnation rights, each calculated at the market price of 50,000 reincarnation points, a total of 500,000 points. Looking at Li Yueming's decisive attitude, Qian Fengtian couldn't help but laugh in the group chats, the newbie giant is too awesome. If you are interested in telling us some of the experience points to protect yourself after entering the dungeon, I am willing to take out an additional 500,000 reincarnation points to buy one. Although no one in the group knew Li Yueming's true identity. However, just the talent that Li Yueming had displayed was enough to make the rich kids who usually had their eyes on the top of their heads look up to him. Not to mention that Li Yueming's score was really high every time he reincarnated. Obtaining so much extra authority to reincarnate was the most simple and powerful way. They would not believe that there was no trick to this. As long as Li Yueming was willing to reveal some of his secrets, they were willing to spend a lot of money to buy some insider information. However, Li Yueming was obviously not interested in this. He casually replied, haha, I don't have any tricks. If I have to say, the only trick after entering the dungeon world is to be cautious and do everything well. Since there is no secret to share, there is no secret to sell. Therefore, please don't continue to make fun of me. After saying that, Li Yueming also did not have the time to continue arguing with them. He directly attached 10 additional reincarnation privileges and said, who else wanted to buy additional reincarnation rights just now? I have the last 10 times. If you need it, you can queue up here to buy it. Hearing Li Yueming's words, the entire group chats was stunned again. F***ck. You just sold 10 extra reincarnations. It had only been a few minutes. Why did he come out to sell 10 additional reincarnation privileges? So, who was this newbie? Was this extra reincarnation authority really toilet paper to wipe his ass? As many as you want? Wang Linlin's question about Great General Li was also reflected in the eyes of the crowd. Why did Wang Linlin ask if Meng Xinzhu was Great General Li? After all, for all the members of the group, the words Great General Li that Wang Linlin mentioned were too confusing. Many people didn't know what it meant. He had never heard Wang Linlin mention this title before. Could it be that this so-called Great General Li and Wang Linlin had some kind of interaction in this public instance dungeon? At this moment, Wang Linlin finally came back to her senses and said excitedly, Great General Li, is it really you? I'm Huang Li Er. You fooled all of us this time. Hearing this, Li Yueming laughed and said, you didn't ask me, and I never said that I wasn't a reincarnator. Therefore, it's still a little inappropriate to say that I'm lying. Wang Linlin was stunned for a moment before she smiled and said, "That's true. I was just saying that in this public reincarnation instance, Ding Yi, Tian Liang, and I should be the first on the points leaderboard. In the end, we didn't expect that all of us would guess wrong. The three of us had similar points, but none of us won. Instead, a first place with an ID starting with the word 7 suddenly appeared. He had a total of 500,000 to 600,000 points more than us, making us all confused." Li Yueming didn't have much to reply to this. He only replied, "We are quite fated, haha." Many people were still confused by the conversation between the two. However, a few of them had clearly heard the implied meaning. Chapter 736, Administrator, The Origin of Dark Energy, 2. The only person she had mentioned who had 500,000 or 600,000 points more than her was the mysterious reincarnator who was ranked first on the points rankings. So, Wang Linlin had gotten such good results because she had clung onto the newbie giant's thigh? The possibility that he deduced was a little scary. However, there was no other reliable explanation that could explain everything that had happened. Therefore, no matter how unwilling they were to believe it, they could only force themselves to believe it. At Moonstar Swoosh, newbie giant, you're the big boss who's ranked first on the public reincarnation dungeon leaderboard. Ho Ping Ian, could there really be two big shots on the rankings in our group at the same time? Qian Fengtian, the ID of the newbie boss also happens to start with 7. In addition, there are so many additional reincarnation privileges today. I guess it's probably true. Qin Rishan, so terrifying, newbie boss, I'm willing to pay 60,000 yuan for the additional reincarnation authority. I'll definitely cling to you in the future. Linlin can't stop me either. I said it. After understanding everything, he was stunned. Li Yueming immediately received a grand welcome and reception in the group chats. In the previous few transactions, Qian Ning, Ho Ping Ian, and the others were polite to Li Yueming, but most of them were only because of Qin Rishan and Li Yueming's potential. But now, they found out that Li Yueming was actually ranked first on the public reincarnation dungeon leaderboard. The respect and importance they had for him soared by who knew how many levels. After all, no matter which world it was, there was never a lack of talented people. However, the vast majority of the prodigies had all died due to various unexpected situations and natural and man-made disasters. For a reincarnator like Li Yueming who could kill his way out of an army of thousands, he was no longer simply a person with potential. He was a well-deserved rookie, a rising star in the world of reincarnators. In the end, Li Yueming's 20 additional reincarnation privileges were all sold as he wished. As for the price, Qin Rishan and the others were willing to use more reincarnation points to buy it, but Li Yueming was not willing to accept this favor for no reason. Therefore, he still sold it at the price of 50,000 reincarnation points for an additional reincarnation authority. 20 extra reincarnations meant 1 million points. In addition to the 1 million or so reincarnation points he obtained from the previous calculation, he had almost gathered 3 million reincarnation points. One had to know that this was only because he had sold half of the additional reincarnation authority. If he wanted to sell the other half of the additional reincarnation authority, he could gather 3 million reincarnation points in the blink of an eye. It could be said that Li Ming had really made a killing this time. After ending the transaction and the chat in the group, Wang Linlin sent him a few more private messages. Unfortunately, Li Yueming was busy at the moment, so he didn't have time to see what Wang Linlin was talking about. He closed the group chats. Li Yueming pondered. Only then did he prepare to enter the administrator group chats that the reincarnation mark had invited him to. If the group chats of Qin Rishan and the others was a small circle of rich kids, then the administrator group chat that Li Yueming was about to enter was a circle of authority dogs. Compared to the small circle of rich kids who could only influence the matters of a city or a place, the small circle of rich kids was a little different. This circle of authority dogs was not ordinary. If nothing unexpected happened, the people in the other party's small circle might be the most elite and promising group of reincarnators. His mind was filled with thoughts. However, Li Yueming did not stop moving. He silently opened the group chats that the reincarnation mark had invited him to. There were 10 ordinary administrators neatly arranged in it. City Lord Fu Dalong of City H, City Lord Li Fuwen of City B, City Lord Su Yu of City G, City Lord Fu Wentao of City L. A bunch of names were listed. Although Li Yueming didn't know a few of them, he had heard of their names. After all, be it City H or B, City G or City L, they were the largest and most prosperous cities in the reincarnation world. If this world had a population of 100 million, then the population of the cities where these 10 administrators were located would account for half of the world's population. Just like Linjiang City or Star Moon City under Li Yueming's command, they were like ants in front of a city of this scale. In other words, the city lords of these cities could indeed be considered the most elite batch of reincarnators in this world. At this moment, Li Yueming had yet to speak. The group chats was already in an uproar. Fu Dalong asked, did someone pass the test of the reincarnation mark again? But why was he called the sole administrator? Could it be that the other party's authority is one level higher than ours? Li Fuwen said, Dalong, don't be anxious. It shouldn't be long before there's news. Su Yu, if I remember correctly, it's been almost 10 years since a newcomer joined this group chats, right? We can't hold on much longer these years. We're all relying on the old capital we left behind. Now, it's not easy for a newcomer to come, and his authority is even higher than ours. If nothing unexpected happened, the other party should be the arrangement behind the reincarnation mark. Chapter 737, Administrator, the Origin of the Dark Energy. The group chats was in full swing. The topic of discussion made Li Yueming a little shocked. Although he knew that the reincarnation mark was just a cover-up. The reason why reincarnators could truly transcend the space-time torrent was because they had the protection of a universe-grade space-time treasure. But now, when he heard the group of order protectors from the reincarnation world discussing it in the group, Li Yueming still tasted an extremely absurd taste. The world they were in was just a small pond, and the place they crossed was the real vast ocean. However, countless ordinary reincarnators had always thought that the so-called prime material plane they were in was the true vast ocean. The worlds they transmigrated to were instead small ponds for the natives. Karma and origin were all reversed. However, no one could stand up and say that they had misunderstood. How ridiculous! After Li Yueming came in, he didn't rush to say anything. Instead, he flipped through the chat history and collected enough information. After he had a grasp of what they were discussing and paying attention to, he posted a message, "Hello, everyone. My name is Li Yueming. I'm a reincarnator from the border town of Linjiang City's Star Moon City. Can you explain to me why I suddenly entered this group chats? What's the situation with the darkness invasion that you're talking about?" As the only high-level administrator, he was the one and only person who managed the entire place. Li Yueming's authority in this group chats was very high. He didn't even need to take the initiative to remind him when he sent the message. All the ordinary administrators in the group chats were immediately reminded of the reincarnation mark. Therefore, someone quickly stood up and replied, "Hello, Lord Li. My name is Li Fuwen, the City Lord of City B. According to the rules set by the reincarnation mark, you are the only administrator. Your authority and level are higher than ours, so we should report to you. The reason why you entered the group chats should be because you passed our test. The authority in your hands is higher than ours, and you should shoulder a higher mission than ours. As for why you became the only senior administrator, we don't know either." Li Yueming nodded. However, the doubts in his heart did not disappear at all. Therefore, he asked again, "So what's the situation with the darkness invasion you mentioned? Isn't the invasion of darkness the greatest enemy in our world?" Hearing his doubts, another person stood out and added, "Lord Li, I'm the city lord of H City, Fu Dalong. You have passed the test, so you should have understood the truth of our world, right? Li Yueming didn't say anything. However, at this juncture, not saying anything clearly meant that he agreed. Thus, Fu Dalong continued, the so-called invasion of darkness is not what the outside world claims. It is the invasion of the world by dark energy, causing the world to be in chaos. On the contrary, dark energy is one of the main forms of the protective shield of our world. Its function is to isolate all prying and perception of our world from the outside world. It's also because of its existence that we were able to return safely without being investigated after we went to the reincarnation world to cause trouble. However, this barrier formed from dark energy has become increasingly unstable a few years ago. It even shows signs of shrinking over the years. At this point, he paused for a moment. After a long while, he said carefully, according to our judgment, the reason for this situation should be because the energy of the reincarnation mark is insufficient. In order to solve this problem, we can only think of various ways to replenish the energy of the reincarnation mark. Otherwise, once the protective barrier breaks, explodes, or collapses, we, who are protected by it, will all be finished. Although it was only a few short conversations, the amount of information that Li Yueming received was not small at all. In this way, everything made sense. No wonder the so-called dark energy and dark tide could not be eradicated. It turned out that this thing was not the so-called world-destroying energy at all, but a protective shield used to protect the peace of this world. It was also because this was a protective shield. Chapter 738, The Ultimate Test, The Origin of the Dark Energy. The dark energy that corroded the reincarnation plane was a part of the reincarnation world's protective shield. Its true function was to prevent the outside world from spying on the existence of the reincarnation world and pose a threat to the reincarnators inside. After all, reincarnators had been active in many worlds and many years. Even if the outside world did not know about the plans of the Alliance of Order, they should have been able to sense a lot over the years. He thought back to Han Bufen's description of the universe treasure and the space-time plan. Although Li Yueming was a little shocked, he didn't find it strange. So, those dark creatures in the darkness invasion were the result of the collapse of the reincarnation mark's protective shield. City B's city lord Li Fuwen stood up and replied, the energy shield of the reincarnation mark itself is not harmful, and naturally, it will not give rise to anything that will harm the reincarnator. Those dark creatures come from the chaotic world outside the protective shield. When the energy shield is intact, they can't threaten the reincarnation world. However, when the energy shield collapses and contracts, they are attracted to us and pour in endlessly from the weak point of the protective shield. Many of the so-called dark creatures are ghosts wandering in the universe. Due to our limitations, we are unable to trace the source of their appearance or the meaning of their existence. To us, their existence itself is an absurd nothingness. Hearing this, Li Yueming did not reply for a long time. Obviously, he had to digest the meaning of Li Fuwen's information. After a long while, Li Yueming finally came back to his senses and continued to ask in the group chats, in that case, what method do you use to replenish the energy of the universe treasure? He did not have to worry about any problems in the reincarnation world. After all, even if the reincarnation world exploded tomorrow, as long as the reincarnation mark was still active, he could return to the main plane he originally belonged to through the reincarnation mark. In other words, even if the planets outside exploded, he still had a home to return to. However, the problem that had occurred in the reincarnation world was something that he had to pay attention to. After all, if there was a problem with the reincarnation mark, then forget about saving the world in the future, it was unknown whether he could still live well in the future. The group chats was silent for a while. In the end, it was the city lord of Jorgopol who stood up and answered, after the universe treasure turns into the reincarnation mark, its own operation and the activities of the reincarnator are actually interconnected. The world will of those order planets that have suffered setbacks in their development, or have problems with themselves, or whose reasons we still do not understand, will use some means that we cannot understand to contact the mark of reincarnation. The world consciousness will actively or passively invite the reincarnation mark to send reincarnators to the planet to help it complete missions that some native creatures cannot complete. After the mission is completed, according to certain standards that we cannot judge, the world consciousness will promise to pay some source luck and treasures as compensation to the reincarnation mark. The reincarnation mark would integrate these missions and send reincarnators into the reincarnation world to complete these missions. The reincarnators would obtain reincarnation points to exchange for various weapons and items by completing missions. The reincarnation mark would collect some additional energy from these activities to open up the space-time path and maintain its own operation. Suyu's message paused. He seemed to have sorted out the complicated thoughts in his mind before continuing. Through this self-sufficient internal logic, the operation of the reincarnation mark has always been relatively stable. Even if there are occasional fluctuations, it won't be too exaggerated. However, for some reason, the energy fluctuations of the reincarnation mark had become more and more unstable over the years. Even if we and the Reincarnator Association consciously contribute some reincarnation points and items that can increase the energy of the reincarnation mark, it's only a drop in the bucket. It's still unable to make up for the deficit of the reincarnation mark. It's also because of this that the so-called dark energy has appeared over the past few hundred years. It has slowly eroded the living space of us reincarnators. Suyu's words were very long and contained a lot of content. She was the only female among the 10 administrators, and her attitude toward Li Yueming was the best among them. Li Yueming listened carefully. The operation logic of the reincarnation mark was not complicated. Just as Li Yueming had guessed a long time ago, he maintained his operations by taking kickbacks. The planet's will was the employer. The reincarnation mark was the platform's middleman. And this group of reincarnators were the chosen ones. However, the purpose of the platform was different from the capitalists in his previous life who wanted to make money. It was to train and nurture the reincarnators to accelerate their growth. Thus, his face was not hateful. To the reincarnators, the reincarnation mark could be considered a towering tree that shielded them from the wind and rain. After thinking about it, Li Yueming replied, "In that case, have you found a way to solve the problem of the collapse of the protective shield? If the reincarnation mark is unable to support us, the reincarnators who reside in the chaos, I'm afraid we will be finished in an instant." Chapter 739, The Ultimate Test, The Origin of Dark Energy, 2. There is no doubt that the collapse and contraction of the protective shield is caused by a lack of energy. However, according to our bold guesses after many attempts, the reason for the lack of energy in the reincarnation mark is not because of us reincarnators. It is more likely that there is a problem with the reincarnation mark itself. If this is really the case, filling the energy deficit is only a temporary solution. Moreover, we reincarnators are simply unable to fill such a large energy deficit. As for the specifics of what we need to do to cure the root cause, forgive us for our limited ability. I reckon that only you, who has a higher authority, can come into contact with it after obtaining all the authority. Hearing this, Li Yueming fell into deep thought. There was a problem with the reincarnation mark, causing the protective shield to shrink and collapse. This would undoubtedly continuously compress the living space of the reincarnators. But how could he know what was wrong with the reincarnation mark? Besides, even if he took 1,000 steps back and knew where the problem was, who could guarantee that he could make up for it? He pondered carefully for a long time. Li Yueming suddenly remembered that when he was calculating the reincarnation authority, the reincarnation mark mentioned 2 special terms. One was the ultimate examination, and the other was the special reincarnation dungeon. Furthermore, he had been reminded that the instance dungeon would begin in 3 months, so that he could prepare in advance. If there were any special notifications from the reincarnation mark after the upgrade, other than the current group chats, this was the only message that was worth paying attention to. Of course, Li Yueming had his own guesses. However, he was not stupid enough to self-destruct in the group. After all, he had just entered this so-called administrator group chats. The members here were all famous city lords in this world. Every one of them could be considered the strongest reincarnators. Moreover, according to what Li Yueming knew about the assessment conditions for joining us, everyone who could enter this administrator group chats should have obtained more than 3 SSS class reincarnation scores. In front of them, Li Yueming had higher authority. There was still some white. Moreover, what they said here could only be considered one-sided. Li Yueming had no way to judge whether it was true or false. But he was unwilling to speak. The normal administrators in the group were all curious about him. H City's City Lord Fu Dalong, at Seoul Administrator, respected Senior Administrator, can you reveal your assessment results? We are very curious about this. After all, your authority is much higher than ours. City B's City Lord Li Fuwen, same request. I used to think that my administrator title was very authoritative and eye-catching. I didn't expect a high-level administrator to pop out now. Fu Dalong, at Li Fuwen, what do you mean? Are you disrespectful to the senior administrator? Li Fuwen, I'm not, I didn't. Pfft, don't label others. The city lord of Jorgapol, Su Yuking, said, stop arguing. The senior administrator probably doesn't know if we are reliable or not. The information isn't for now at senior administrator, are you interested in coming to Jorgapol as a guest? I'll be the host and welcome you with the highest level of hospitality in Jorgapol. You can choose any reincarnator girl in the city. Fu Dalong Atswiu, that, can I come and rub against it? Just rub against it. Li Fuwen, +1, but I'm different from Fu Dalong. I'm not here to treat my guests. I mainly want to meet the senior administrator. With a few words. Not long after, the atmosphere in the group chats became heated. The few of them looked completely different from their previous serious expressions. Li Yueming didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He really didn't expect that the group chats of these reincarnators would be so lively and nonsensical. It was no different from the group chats of Qin Rishan and the others. If not for the fact that the name of the group chats was indeed different. Li Yueming wouldn't find it odd if the city lords were Qin Rishan and the others. However, no one seemed to have stipulated that top-notch reincarnators had to be serious and old-fashioned. They could not be silly. Therefore, although Li Yueming felt like complaining, he still restrained himself from doing so. Without knowing what the other party was like, he had to be extremely careful when revealing information. After thinking for a while, he replied, since you guys have answered so many of my questions without hiding anything, as a show of sincerity to make friends, I'm naturally willing to answer some of your questions. However, I don't understand what the assessment results you're talking about are. May I trouble City Lord Ji Fu to answer me? Only then will I know how to answer. Seeing that he had really replied, the group fell silent for a while. Although Fu Dalong, Li Fuwen, and the others were familiar with each other, they were obviously a little nervous in front of Li Yueming. After all, they didn't know how much authority Li Yueming had. However, according to their current authority, Li Yueming's authority was definitely not lower than theirs. He might even have direct authority over them. He could be considered their immediate superior. Although most of them shouldered a certain amount of responsibility, so they were not worried about being demoted at will. However, they couldn't afford to be careless when facing Li Yueming. Fu Dalong, who was called by Li Yueming, quickly replied, Sir, the assessment results refer to the reincarnation score you obtain when you complete our assessment. This is also the direct evaluation of the reincarnation mark on you. It is different from the evaluation of a normal dungeon. Hearing this, Li Yueming touched his chin and pondered for a moment. In that case, his score should be SSS. This result might cause a huge uproar outside, but it shouldn't cause too much of a commotion in this group chats. All of them had obtained SSS rank ratings. Of course, Li Yueming didn't care even if it caused a commotion. Anyway, he had the authority and had absolute authority over this group of ordinary administrators. He wasn't afraid that they would have any comments. Therefore, Li Yueming replied, so the assessment score refers to the score when you complete the R assessment. Then my score is SSS. It should only be considered average. As soon as he said this, instantly, the entire group chats fell silent again. And this time, the silence was longer than any of the previous times. Li Yueming didn't know why they were like this. Although the SSS score was indeed considered outstanding, it was still not a problem. However, since these people could become top reincarnators and the city lords of super cities, it was impossible for them not to even have an SSS rank score, right? Just as he was wondering what had gone wrong. Finally, someone replied in the group chats. Fu Dalong said, SSS rating, Lord, I will kneel in front of you. Li Fuwen, is this what a senior administrator is like? It's simply terrifying. Su Yu was speechless. Sir, how did you do it? Don't you think that the difficulty of testing our reincarnation instance dungeon is too high? Fu Wen Tao, I'm already a fool. Back then, I really risked my life in the assessment. In the end, I only got an A score. This can already be considered a unique existence in the group. An SSS score. How ridiculous is it to obtain this? Li Yueming's SSS rating was exposed. The entire administrator group chats almost exploded. The group of administrators who usually boasted of being top reincarnators began to doubt their lives. Now, they finally knew why Li Yueming was above them and became the only administrator in the group chats. F***CK. The highest score among them was only A, and most of them only got B or B+. Under such circumstances, an SSS rating suddenly popped up. If it was the same as their authority, then it would be a miracle. Li Yueming only realized at this moment that the score for participating in the R assessment was different from the score under normal circumstances. No wonder his intuition told him that he had done his best in this reincarnation world. In the end, the reincarnation mark only gave him an SSS rating. Chapter 740, the space fragment expands again. 1. For instance, dungeons related to the R assessment, the grading method was 10 times or 100 times more difficult than normal instance dungeons. Rich Dragon Su Yu and the others were the city lords of the largest cities in the main world. They had indeed obtained an SSS rank evaluation. Even so, in the Wii instance dungeon assessment, they could only get an A and grade at most. He had never even heard of someone with an SSS rating like Li Yueming. Li Yueming only found out at this time. In the group chats, Fu Dalong could not help but say, SSS grade, how high is the authority of the Lord? No wonder he could become the only high-level administrator. Su Yu also praised, indeed, there's always someone better than you. Sir, you've really opened our eyes. Seeing this situation, Li Fuwen, Fu Wen Tao, and the others hurriedly followed suit and praised. All of a sudden, all kinds of *T flew in the group chats, almost blowing Li Yueming up to the sky. If the reincarnators in the outside world saw them bragging to Li Yueming, they would probably widen their eyes in disbelief. One had to know that this group of people were the most powerful group of order managers among the reincarnators. Although they did not say it, they were proud in their hearts. Even though they knew that Li Yueming was probably their boss, they were not afraid of him. However, they could not help but feel a little unconvinced. After all, they didn't know who this so-called only senior administrator was, nor did they know what special abilities this so-called senior administrator had. It had suddenly climbed above their heads for no reason. It would be strange if they weren't depressed. However, due to the restriction of the reincarnation mark, they did not dare to do anything to Li Yueming. However, he was still unconvinced in his heart. And now, when Li Yueming told them the score he had obtained in the R assessment. Fu Dalong and the others immediately shut up. He had no choice but to give her an SSS rating. He couldn't refuse to accept it. Thus, after being convinced, the following communication was relatively simple. We haven't asked for your name yet. If you think it's inconvenient, you can use a code name. Fu Dalong said. Li Fuwen also echoed, that's right, that's right. Sir, please give us a respectful title. In the future, we will first seek your approval before deciding whether to implement any decisions. Sir, you have the right to reject. Su Yu added, Sir, you probably haven't fully understood the rights and responsibilities of an administrator. Simply put, before you joined the group, this administrator group was where the 10 of us discussed and formulated policies for the reincarnation world. The 10 of us are the managers of the reincarnation world selected by the reincarnation mark. Our goal is to maintain the peace and stability of the reincarnation world and promote the steady development of the reincarnation world. The Reincarnators Association is an organization that we created to prevent internal strife among the reincarnators. The system of guarding the city is also a policy strategy that we came up with after we held a meeting in this group. Li Yueming read through all the information carefully. He quickly understood the ins and outs of the administrators' group chats. There were 10 normal managers in front of him, and each of them had obtained at least 3 SSS level reincarnators. After triggering and passing our test, they would have higher authority than ordinary reincarnators. They could use some of the authority in their hands to interfere with matters that the reincarnation mark itself could not easily interfere with. For example, establishing order. Another example was maintaining order. After thinking for a while, Li Yueming replied, My surname is Li. I just became an administrator not long ago. I don't know much about the current situation. Please forgive me. After seeing his answer. In the group chats, the group of normal administrators were also very polite. They all expressed that if Li Yueming had any questions, they would tell him everything they knew. Both sides exchanged pleasantries before Li Yueming stopped bothering them. After all, he knew enough information now. It would be more reasonable to continue asking after digesting it. He closed the group chats. Li Yueming slowly opened his eyes and heaved a sigh of relief. Due to the existence of the R assessment, this public reincarnation instance dungeon could be said to be the most difficult instance dungeon he had ever experienced. It was also because of this that after so many years, his nerves had been very tense at all times. Now, the dungeon was finally over. Li Yueming's tense nerves relaxed. Raising his arm to open the reincarnation mark, Li Yueming left the white reincarnation space and returned to the familiar and unfamiliar main material plane. After waking up, Li Yueming subconsciously looked at the time. Good heavens! This public reincarnation instance dungeon actually took him half a month. It took him even longer than the previous reincarnations combined. It seemed that it was because the level of this reincarnation dungeon was relatively high. This was especially so when the world of reincarnating was upgraded to level 9 for a period of time. This was why the time in the outside world was much longer than normal dungeons. Li Yueming estimated that if this wasn't a public reincarnation dungeon, the flow of time would have been even faster. At this moment, it was daytime in the reincarnation world. Chapter 741, The Space Fragment Expands Again. 2. Li Yueming didn't rush out of the room. Instead, he raised his left hand that wasn't engraved with the mark of reincarnation and called out, Hey, are you still there? A breath passed. 2 breaths have passed. There was no response. It seemed that the world fragment had fallen into a deep sleep. After calling out to him several times, Li Yueming couldn't help but mutter, I even specially bought a bit of Broken World Origin. Since you're in a deep sleep, I can only use it to open up a chaos world. Li Yueming muttered. The so-called chaotic world was a broken world without clear order and world consciousness. Although such a world could also be called a world, it also had some functions and characteristics of a world. However, the unstable factors were frighteningly high. After all, the origin of the chaos world was incomplete. Who knew how long the world could last? Perhaps one day, the chaos world that he had created would be destroyed due to the flaw in the origin. At that time, not only would the things placed in the chaotic world be ruined, but the reincarnators who possessed this chaotic world would also be affected by the destruction of the world. That was the power to destroy the world. It was not something that reincarnators could withstand at all. Even the slightest bit of damage could put one's life in danger. Therefore, under normal circumstances, few reincarnators would use the damaged world origin to create a chaotic world. Most of them would only use it as nutrients to nourish worlds with a certain order or world consciousness. However, just as Li Yueming thought that he could only wait for a while before dying, the world fragment that was sleeping suddenly reacted. A blurry consciousness was transmitted to Li Yueming's mind, and he asked, "When I was sleeping just now, I seemed to have heard you mention the broken world origin." He could feel the urgent consciousness of the world fragment. Li Yueming was speechless. So why was this guy so sensitive to all kinds of keywords? Could it be that it had a keyword search function that would automatically wake up when it sensed or heard certain keywords? She seemed to have guessed his thoughts. The world fragment's consciousness whined, "Don't judge me with such a narrow mindset. For you humans, 10 days is enough to do a lot of things, but for species with long lifespans like us, 10 days isn't even enough for us to close our eyes." So this Bayo didn't really fall asleep at all. It was just in a state similar to standby mode. I sensed it when you came back from the reincarnation world. However, I saw that you were empty-handed and didn't bring anything. Moreover, standby mode saves more energy, so I didn't reply. It would be better if he didn't explain. Li Yueming was even more depressed after hearing his explanation. Probably only this damned guy could eat free rice so confidently. He rolled his eyes. "All right, you're only in high spirits now anyway. You're not interested in me normally." As he spoke, he took out the broken world origin that he had exchanged from his bag. The world origin looked very small. It was only the size of a fist and looked like a water ball. It contained the stars in the deep sky and endless darkness. Although there were a few places that were broken, they were still dazzling. The moment it was taken out, even the sunlight in the sky paled in comparison. The entire world was left with a dazzling spiral of stars. The moment it saw it, the world fragment's consciousness was stunned. It swallowed and said, "D*MN, it's really the true origin of the world. It seems that my mother's judgment is right. She's been following you for a long time." As he spoke, Li Yueming's left arm emitted a bright light. The world fragment's consciousness could not wait to take this broken world origin into its bag. Seeing this, Li Yueming reacted quickly and immediately put it back into his backpack. The duck in his hand flew away. The world fragment's consciousness immediately became anxious and said excitedly, "Aya, what are you doing, EEOE.cm?" Li Yueming looked at it and said after a while, "I spent a lot of money to get this thing, but can't it be like the previous few times when I beat a dog with meat buns and never returned?" The consciousness of the world fragment shrank. Clearly, he felt a little guilty. However, she quickly became self-righteous again and sent him an emoji of rolling her eyes. This time is naturally different. Whether it's the world mold or anything else, it can only speed up the growth of the space, but it can't replenish itself. Let this baby absorb this broken world's origin and replenish its energy. This baby might be able to help you in the next reincarnation. If you encounter any trouble, how about this Bayo grit his teeth and open up a path to give you some treasures in return. As the saying goes, raising a ball is like using a ball for 1,000 days. Li Yueming had adopted and fed so many resources to the bottomless pit of the world fragment consciousness. Wasn't it all for the sake of being able to use a cheat one day? Now that the world fragment's consciousness had taken the initiative to propose a return plan, it was simply stepping on the tip of his heart. Therefore, Li Yueming nodded without hesitation. However, to prevent this guy from going back on his word, Li Yueming still asked, I entered the reincarnation world. Logically speaking, I'm not in the same time or space. Under such circumstances, you can still open a path and give me treasures. The world fragment rolled its eyes again and replied, this is the means of our planet, why should you care? When the time comes, you just have to tell me what you need and wait for me to give it to you. I will naturally take care of the rest. All this while, the consciousness of the world fragment had always been harmless. This time, he probably really saw a treasure. It was rare for him to be a little tough in front of Li Yueming. However, as he spoke, it seemed to have thought of something bad and added, but one day, I have to make it clear that you can't be in a high-level world with perfect laws. Otherwise, not to mention me, even the so-called reincarnation mark might not be able to protect you. Hearing this, Li Yueming still felt that it was a little unreliable. But since he had already said so much, what else could he do? He could only pinch his nose and admit it. Li Yueming didn't search anymore. He took out the broken world origin from his backpack and handed it to the world fragment consciousness. The world fragment's consciousness was clearly already impatient. As soon as Li Yueming took out the item, it immediately swallowed it. Li Yueming could only feel a pure and incomparably terrifying energy constantly rippling. It's like the world is falling apart. It was as if the world was being born. Between life and death, an incomparable chaotic aura was produced. Fortunately, this feeling came and went quickly. After the world fragment's consciousness swallowed the broken world origin, all the strange fluctuations suddenly disappeared. Seeing this situation, Li Yueming closed his eyes and calmed down. He carefully felt the world in his arm. Some time ago, he had planted a lot of spiritual rice and fruits. By setting the flow of time and temperature to cultivate, many fruits in the world had already matured. However, Li Yueming's main focus was not on these details, but the changes in the origin of the world fragment after swallowing the broken world origin. The space of the world fragment was expanding. Previously, Li Yueming had already planted the entire world fragment with crops. However, as this round of expansion continued, the entire fragment space expanded by dozens of times. The vegetables and fruits that Li Yueming had planted before were no longer even 1/10 of the size of this world. Li Yueming also realized that the fragment world had become more real. Be it the wind or the rain, the mountains, or the earth, everything was much more real than the hazy and chaotic appearance before. This should be the effect of the broken world's origin. It could not accelerate the growth of the world, expand the world's area, or replenish the world's foundation orders. Chapter 742, The Nervous Zhao Xia, Taking Care of the Spiritual Fields. 1. It was just a moment. Li Yueming could clearly sense that after absorbing the broken world origin, the world fragment was much more complete than before. He looked at the mountains and rivers in the fragment world that were becoming larger and more complete. Li Yueming's mood improved a lot. Let's not talk about whether the world fragment origin could really enter the reincarnation world to give him treasures. Just this tenfold expansion of the space was enough to make up for Li Yueming's huge loss this time. After swallowing the world origin, the world fragment's consciousness chuckled and said, "How is it? Do you feel like you've made a killing?" "Humph, my control over the world has become more precise, so your authority in the fragment world has also increased. You can find a few people to take care of this world that belongs to you. The treasures produced in it will be my food expenses." It was obviously in a very good mood. As it spoke, it yawned and said, "It's just sauce. If you don't have anything else, this Bao Bao will run away first. Remember to bring more delicious food for this Bao Bao next time. Oh right, I don't want the world consciousness remnant. It made me sick the last time I ate it. I still feel traumatized now." Li Yueming nodded, indicating that it could leave. As for the food expenses, this guy still hadn't made him recoup his losses. The number of reincarnation points he ate was at least a few million. If they didn't even give him any benefits, who could afford to raise a Paishu that couldn't enter? He roughly estimated the area of the world that had expanded this time. He did not expect that there would be additional gains from feeding the world fragment consciousness. The flow of time in the fragment world and the main world was different. With Li Yueming's careful temperature and humidity settings, the high-grade spiritual melons, spiritual fruits, and spiritual rice planted in the fields were basically ripe. Reaping all these things would allow him to recover a small amount of HP. In addition, the area of the fragment world had expanded by 10 times. Not to mention the benefits of other laws and order, just in terms of size, the fragment world was already larger than the small worlds that the senior reincarnators' families had passed down for generations. As long as he cultivated a few more times and harvested the reincarnation points that were fed to the consciousness of the world fragment could be earned back with interest. There was also an endless supply of treasures. Rounding up, this round of blood was not a loss. Thinking of this, Li Yueming was in a good mood. The consciousness that was immersed in the fragment world left and returned to the main material plane. He opened his eyes and scanned the city lord's mansion. For more than half a month, there was not much change in the city lord's mansion. It was still ancient and quiet. This was normal. If he woke up and found that the surrounding environment had changed greatly, then he would need to be vigilant. After all, the city lord's mansion was his only residence, and it was also the most heavily guarded place in Star Moon City. Without his permission, even Zhao Xia did not dare to enter casually. It was impossible for anyone to dare to modify the city lord's mansion without his consent. Li Yueming stood up and stretched his limbs. The joints and muscles all over his body made crisp sounds as if he had just woken up from a dream. Even if Li Yueming didn't do anything. However, just from his appearance, even an ordinary person could tell that his current physique was extraordinary. Although he didn't get any body strengthening in the fantasy world, Li Yueming's gains weren't any less than the last time. It couldn't be helped. The level of the fantasy world was high. Moreover, he had obtained the high-level administrator authority of the reincarnation mark. This time, the power returned was more than the power returned in the previous reincarnations combined. Among the various bonuses of returning power, the bonus to physique was the most powerful. Therefore, Li Yueming could easily punch the ground with his physical strength. Even among the many experienced reincarnators, his current strength could definitely be considered outstanding. Hearing the sound from inside the room, a series of hurried footsteps came from outside the door. A moment later, Zhao Xia's voice came from outside the door and asked gently, "City Lord, are you back?" Li Yueming stopped stretching and replied casually, "Come back." Hearing his answer, Zhao Xia was clearly a little surprised. She hurriedly said, "Congratulations to City Lord for coming out of seclusion. This subordinate has already prepared hot water in advance. May I ask if you want to bathe and change your clothes now?" "Yes." Li Yueming nodded. After obtaining Li Yueming's permission, Zhao Xia pushed open the door and walked in. Looking at Li Yueming, who was emitting the aura of a strong person, Zhao Xia could clearly feel that her city lord had become stronger again. If he remembered correctly, Li Yueming should have just become a reincarnator, right? It had only experienced a few reincarnations, but it had already become so powerful. He was truly talented. Although Zhao Xia was deep in thought, her body did not dare to be negligent. He quickly helped Li Yueming clean up the room, which was already a little dusty. Then, he turned around and took out a change of clothes and a towel to dry his body. It had to be said that she was definitely a smart person with decent manners. This time, Li Yueming had entered a public reincarnation dungeon. Chapter 743, The Nervous Zhao Xia, Taking Care of the Spiritual Fields. 2. However, the difference wasn't too great. Therefore, Zhao Xia had already expected Li Yueming to return during this period of time. Furthermore, he had arranged everything in advance. Li Yueming had been suffering in the reincarnation world for many years. His nerves had always been tense. It was not easy to solve those annoying things. Now, he really needed to relax. Walking into the bath, Zhao Xia was very smart. This time, the bath water was the same as the one Li Yueming had mixed last time. She didn't make any changes. The only difference was that Li Yueming's physique was now even stronger. Therefore, he felt that boiling water at 100 degrees Celsius was a little uncomfortable. It could not even make his body slightly hot. However, Li Yueming didn't blame him. After all, Star Moon City had just been established not long ago, and the conditions were limited. Moreover, Zhao Xia, the head butler, was only an ordinary person. If it was really based on his concept of bathing, it would probably only be more reasonable to run into the lava. He could vaguely feel Li Yueming's dissatisfaction. Zhao Xia thought for a moment and guessed where the problem was. She hurriedly lowered her head and said, "This subordinate didn't consider it properly. Please punish me." Li Yueming waved his hand to indicate that it was fine. After running for a while, he stood up from the bath, dried his body, and changed his clothes. "How's the development of Star Moon City? Is there anything I need to solve?" Li Yueming didn't blame her. However, this matter still made Zhao Xia feel a little sad. If nothing unexpected happened, Li Yueming's physical fitness and strength would only become more and more terrifying. It wouldn't take long for her to be eliminated as a butler, right? She thought that she would be able to serve Li Yueming for at least 10 years before she was eliminated by more outstanding talents. After all, it took time for a reincarnator to grow. Before Li Yueming had grown up, her secretary was still considered above average. However, he did not expect Li Yueming to grow so fast. In less than a year, he had already completed the transformation that ordinary reincarnators might not be able to complete in 10 or 20 years. The current Li Yueming should be fully qualified to hire a woman who was also a reincarnator as his secretary. Such a terrifying growth rate made her, a not-so-outstanding secretary, seem particularly pale. Thinking of this, she could not help but feel a little depressed. However, he still forced himself to be spirited. He looked up at Li Yueming and smiled, "City Lord, in the past half a month, the people of Star Moon City have been working overtime. The houses in the city have basically been built. Nothing worthy of your attention has happened, and no other reincarnators have come to visit." Li Yueming nodded. "That's good." He straightened his clothes and glanced at Zhao Xia, who was forcing a smile. After a moment of contemplation, he guessed what she was thinking, but he did not expose her. He walked to the door and said, "Accompany me to the city to see the development." Zhao Xia bowed respectfully and said, "Yes, sir." The two of them came out of the bathroom one after another. The city lord's mansion was the highest point of the entire Star Moon City. Standing on the city wall outside the city lord's mansion, one could overlook the entire Star Moon City. Thus, Li Yueming did not need to spend too much effort to patrol. After a period of drastic modifications, Star Moon City, which was originally barren and lifeless, had undergone great changes. The city walls that had been broken due to years of neglect had now been filled with various kinds of stone materials. The collapsed buildings that had been cleaned up by the dark energy pollution had also been cleaned up. Moreover, new buildings had been built on the original site. One after another, new buildings rose from the ground. From afar, craftsmen and laborers could be seen busy. Li Yueming glanced from afar. Although he did not get close, his eyesight and hearing were beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Therefore, he nodded after a moment and said, "You did well. This month's salary will be increased by 1 packet of spiritual rice." Zhao Xia trembled when she heard that. She was a little flattered and said, "City Lord, I'm just..." He was just doing something that was part of his job. Wasn't a bag of spiritual rice too expensive? Li Yueming smiled. Reward for meritorious deeds and punish for wrongdoings. Although spiritual rice is precious, don't you know who I am? Do I look like someone who lacks such rewards? Zhao Xia thought about it and did not refuse. Instead, she said seriously, City Lord is the most generous person I've ever seen. It's Xia's blessing to be able to follow behind you and help you manage the city. Usually, when she talked to Li Yueming, Zhao Xia would be more or less flattering. Then this time, Zhao Xia thought that she could pat her chest and swear that she was sincere. After failing the assessment and being unable to become a reincarnator, often, people like them who were neither high nor low would end up extremely miserable. After all, if ordinary people failed, they would at most continue to be ordinary people. However, this batch of reincarnators could not. They had been placed high hopes by their families since they were young, and the investment and training of their families naturally could not be without a price. If they did not become official reincarnators, they could only go to the territories of other reincarnators to compete for various positions. It would be fine if she was lucky enough to meet a city lord with a good character like her. If they were unlucky enough to meet those with special hobbies, not only would they lose their dignity, they might even lose their lives. It was also because of this that she was so grateful to Li Yueming. Seeing that Zhao Xia's eyes were a little red because of her emotional fluctuations, he could not help but ask. Li Yueming didn't say anything. He didn't think he was a good person, but he also didn't think he was a bad person. As long as they were loyal to him and could do their best to help him solve some complicated problems, he would not be stingy with praise and rewards. On the contrary, if Li Yueming found out that he was being disloyal, he would act rashly. He would also punish or fire them without any mercy. Grace and power are given at the same time, and there is tolerance. This was what a superior should do. As for what Zhao Xia thought and whether she was grateful, it was not within Li Yueming's consideration. After checking the development of Star Moon City, Li Yueming was very satisfied. After thinking about it, there seemed to be an urgent matter that needed to be resolved. Li Yueming said, I'll give you 3 days to find 10 reliable subordinates. Tell them to bring another 100 strong and patient laborers who are good at farming to the city lord's mansion to look for me. I have something for you to do. At this point, Li Yueming's voice paused. He looked at Zhao Xia and smiled. If you do it well, there's still a grand prize waiting for you. Although Zhao Xia didn't know what Li Yueming was talking about, she didn't need to think to know that it was definitely not ordinary. However, it was clearly unwise to be obsessed with rewards at this moment. Therefore, Zhao Xia suppressed the curiosity and excitement in her heart and bowed. Yes, City Lord. I will do my best. Li Yueming nodded and waved his hand, you can go. Zhao Xia bowed again and turned around to do her job. He watched her leave. Li Yueming touched his chin, a thoughtful look on his face. Although he did not know what the ultimate assessment that would be held in 3 months was, he did not know. However, since the reincarnation mark reminded him to be prepared, there was nothing wrong with pulling his condition and combat strength to the maximum in the following time. The last time he entered the fragment space to plant spiritual rice and all kinds of spiritual melons and fruits, it took him a lot of time. This time, he had limited time and did not have the time to go to the fragment world to farm. However, it would be a waste to leave such a large piece of land empty. Therefore, Li Yueming planned to get Zhao Xia to find a few reliable subjects to go to the fragment world to help him manage the Ling fields. Moreover, the fruits and spiritual rice that he had planted earlier had also ripened. If he sold all of them, he estimated that he would earn at least hundreds of thousands of reincarnation points. These were all small amounts of money. Fortunately, the fragment world had given him an increase in his authority. Not only could he enter the fragment world at will, but those who had his permission and authorization could also enter the fragment world. Chapter 744, Reaping the Ling Fields, Giving Him the Right to Reincarnate. 1. After sending Zhao Xia away, Li Yueming once again glanced at the prosperous Star Moon City. Although he knew that it might be wrong to think like this. But sometimes, he actually envied mortals. Life was only a short 100 years, good or bad was just a matter of opening and closing one's eyes. Unlike him, who needed to be extremely energetic at all times. The higher one climbed, the more tired one would be. The wider one looked, the smaller one would feel. Perhaps it was better to be an ordinary person and spend the rest of his life busy. Li Yueming stood on the city wall in a daze for a while. After a long while, he came back to his senses and laughed. There was nothing in the world that did not require a price. Mortals envied reincarnators, and reincarnators would also envy mortals. As for the ups and downs, only individuals knew. Retracting his gaze, Li Yueming turned around and returned to the city lord's mansion. He closed the door and continued his seclusion. According to the special reminder of the reincarnation mark, he would be forcefully involved in a so-called ultimate assessment 3 months later, although Li Yueming did not know what this so-called ultimate assessment was. However, it should be related to the Zerg race and instance dungeons. Since there was still enough time, Li Yueming had to digest his gains from the public reincarnation dungeon as soon as possible. Although the power return this time was only SSS rank. However, the power return to Li Yueming was more than the previous worlds combined. Therefore, Li Yueming's seclusion these few days was mainly to adapt to the new strength in his body. After digesting all the energy, Li Yueming could use the reincarnation points to go to the reincarnator forum or group chats to buy some treasures such as cultivation techniques and secret manuals to continue to increase his strength. Time passed quietly. Li Yueming's control over the power of return was also increasing. On the third day, Zhao Xia came back to report. She did not disappoint him. She successfully found more than 10 carefully selected officers and more than 100 reliable laborers from Star Moon City. After receiving the report, Li Yueming woke up from his seclusion. Looking at the excited and nervous people in front of him, he slowly said, "I asked Secretary Zhao to find you because I want to give you a job. As for what I'm going to do, I believe you've heard of it before. That is to enter the secondary dimension space and help me sow and harvest the phase in the spiritual field." After hearing that Li Yueming was planning to hire them to help manage the Ling fields, they were all shocked. A group of ignorant people might not understand what this meant. However, the experienced and knowledgeable officers were all overjoyed. Previously, when Zhao Xia found them, they were still a little hesitant. After all, even Zhao Xia herself did not know why Li Yueming had recruited so many people. Not to mention this group of officers who were not very familiar with Li Yueming. Therefore, when they decided to sign up, the group of people were somewhat nervous. Now, they were all rejoicing over their decision. One had to know that the spiritual field was an extremely private thing to a reincarnator. To be able to get them to help the reincarnator manage the spiritual field meant that this group of people had already changed from ordinary citizens under the protection of the reincarnator to retainers who specialized in providing services to the reincarnator. Whether it was his salary or status, it would be greatly improved. Looking at the group of people in front of him with different expressions, Li Yueming paused for a moment, giving them enough time to react before continuing, "I'm not asking too much of you. Firstly, the person who manages the Ling fields must be reliable. They cannot reveal any topics related to the Ling fields to the outside world. This is unquestionable. Once I find out that someone has leaked the situation of the Ling fields, I don't need to say what will happen, right? Secondly, you must be careful and serious in managing the Ling fields and sowing. Ling plants are very precious, and the slightest setback will affect the harvest. Therefore, your work cannot be reduced in any way. As for salary and benefits, the officers who manage the Ling fields will receive a salary of 2,500 reincarnation points per month, and the people who work will receive a salary of 2,000 reincarnation points per month. According to the output of the Ling fields, you will be given some phase every month as benefits. In addition, there will be additional rewards for those who work seriously according to the specific situation. Secretary Zhao Xia was in charge of the supervision and reporting of the above. At this point, Li Yueming's eyes slowly swept across everyone. Do you have any questions? You can ask me now. The Ling fields were very important to his future development. Therefore, even if it took some time, Li Yueming had to set the rules as well as possible. He felt Li Yueming's gaze. Beneath them, the officials and citizens shook their heads. Putting aside the phase and other rewards, just the monthly salary of 2,500 reincarnation points was enough for them to obey unconditionally. Seeing that no one had any doubts, Li Yueming nodded. As he slowly raised his right arm, a light blue halo appeared in the city lord's mansion. The faint blue light dissipated and transformed into balls of flame-like substance that entered everyone's bodies. This was the authority that Li Yueming had granted them to enter the fragment world. Chapter 745, Reaping the Ling Fields, giving him the right to reincarnate. 2. Therefore, he was not afraid that any of them would dare to play tricks. After sending them all into the fragment world, Li Yueming looked at Zhao Xia, who was left alone by him, and said, "These are the things that you need to pay attention to when planting and harvesting phase. It won't be wrong to do it according to the contents written on it. In the next period of time, you have to supervise them to pick the spiritual rice, vegetables, and fruits in the spiritual fields." She could feel how much Li Yueming valued her. Zhao Xia's delicate body trembled slightly. After a long while, she nodded solemnly and said, "With the city lord's love, Xia will definitely do her best until she dies." Seeing her solemn expression, it seemed that she was really prepared to go through fire and water at any time. Li Yueming couldn't help but smile. "Just do it with all your heart. You don't have to do this until you die." Zhao Xia did not say anything, but her expression was still extremely serious. Seeing this situation, since she insisted, Li Yueming had nothing to say. He waved at her and said, "Come here." Hearing this, Zhao Xia's face revealed a hint of doubt. The outside world might think that there was some kind of ambiguous relationship between her and Li Yueming. After all, it was normal for the city lord and his secretary to have an ambiguous relationship these days. The phrase "if there's something to do, the secretary will do it. If there's nothing to do, the secretary will do it" was not empty talk. Otherwise, why would the secretary be so trusted? However, only Zhao Xia herself knew that Li Yueming would never let her get too close. The two of them barely had any physical contact, let alone an ambiguous relationship. However, this time, Li Yueming asked her to go over. Was he finally going to hand over his virginity? Zhao Xia's heart trembled a few times. To be honest, when she became Li Yueming's secretary, she was already prepared to face this day. But now, everything seemed to be happening. Zhao Xia could not help but feel nervous. However, perhaps even she did not realize that when she thought of this matter, she was nervous, excited, and afraid. However, there was not much resistance. Was this a bad thing? If it had been half a year ago, she definitely wouldn't have been able to accept it. However, as she got along with Li Yueming, she unexpectedly realized that it wasn't that scary. As she thought about it, Zhao Xia could not help but blush. She said helplessly, City Lord. This isn't good, right?" She was actually acting like a shy little girl. "What's wrong? Are you feeling unwell?" Li Yueming asked curiously. Hearing this, Zhao Xia's face turned even redder. After struggling for a moment, he seemed to have accepted his fate. He lowered his head and said timidly, No, can I take a shower first?" Li Yueming didn't know what she meant at first. It would be stupid if he didn't know. He sized up Zhao Xia. To be honest, he had seen many beauties in so many worlds. Even so, Zhao Xia was not inferior in any way. Normally, he might have just eaten it half-heartedly. However, he was clearly not in the mood to do so. However, it was rare for Zhao Xia to show her feminine side in front of him. Li Yueming held back his laughter and said seriously, "Come over first. It won't affect you if you take a shower or something." Hearing this, Zhao Xia seemed even more at a loss. She thought that Li Yueming would allow her to take a shower before serving her, but she didn't expect Li Yueming to refuse. She could only walk towards Li Yueming with a red face. As he got closer, he felt the masculine and hot aura emitted from Li Yueming's body. His muscles were as firm as a knife cutting through an axe. Zhao Xia could not help but feel her entire body go weak. However, when her eyes met Li Yueming's, she realized that Li Yueming's eyes were extremely clear and there was no ambiguity in them. Zhao Xia's entire body trembled as if she had been electrocuted. It was as if she had just woken up from a dream. She quickly lowered her head and said, "City Lord, what orders do you have?" Seeing this, Li Yueming smiled. "Don't be so nervous and restrained. I don't have many friends in this world. If I have to say, you might be the only one." Zhao Xia was clearly a little shocked when she heard that. She raised her head and glanced at Li Yueming. Her beautiful eyes lit up, but it didn't take long for them to dim again. How could she not want to be friends with Li Yueming? However, reality was an insurmountable wall. She was not a reincarnator, and this alone was a huge gap. Therefore, she lowered her head and said seriously, "Thank you for your kindness, but this subordinate doesn't dare to be compared to you." Li Yueming didn't answer and just smiled. After a moment, he extended his right hand. The reincarnation mark under his arm flickered with a faint yellow light. Before Zhao Xia could understand what Li Yueming was doing, 3 balls of light flew out of the reincarnation mark and disappeared into her body. After doing all this, Li Yueming said, "I won't tease you. As the secretary of Star Moon City, you will be my most capable subordinate in the future. Your current strength is too insignificant, I just gave you 3 temporary reincarnation privileges. You can use these 3 temporary reincarnation privileges to enter the reincarnation world again. Of course, as for how many resources you can obtain in the reincarnation world and whether you can obtain the recognition of the reincarnation mark to become an official reincarnator, that's not something I can decide." Li Yueming's voice wasn't loud, and his tone was no different from usual. However, the contents of the letter were like a bolt from the blue to Zhao Xia. Her eyes widened in disbelief. The 3 orbs that Li Yueming had given her earlier, 3 temporary reincarnation authorities? Didn't everyone only get 1 temporary reincarnation? This had long been confirmed by countless reincarnators that it could not be changed, right? Why was Li Yueming able to grant her 3 temporary reincarnation privileges? Without a doubt, Zhao Xia's mind was in turmoil. He finally came back to his senses. After raising his arm and carefully observing the marks on it, he was surprised to find that he really had 3 additional marks of temporary reincarnation authority. After confirming that he wasn't seeing things, she looked up again, and the emotions in her eyes were overflowing. Suspicion, anxiety, excitement, disbelief. There were so many of them. Li Yueming was a little flustered by her passionate gaze. He waved his hand and said, "It's fine. You can leave. I'll be in seclusion for the next few months. If there's nothing, don't disturb my cultivation." Within the high-level administrator authority granted by the reincarnation mark, not only did it contain the function of silencing and removing the administrator, but it also had the function of giving temporary reincarnation permission. Every year, Li Yueming could give 3 temporary reincarnation privileges to any designated target. Through these 3 temporary reincarnation privileges, they also had the chance to become an official reincarnator, but the difficulty of the assessment was higher than others. But no matter what, for ordinary people who had failed to reincarnate, this thing could definitely be called a treasure that could defy the heavens and change their lives. Zhao Xia was the closest secretary to Li Yueming. As a boss, he could get free benefits, so he would not be stingy to reward his obedient and smart subordinates. Hearing Li Yueming's cough, Zhao Xia came to her senses. She pursed her lips and looked at Li Yueming carefully with a pair of gentle eyes, as if she wanted to engrave Li Yueming's figure into the deepest part of her mind. After a long while, Zhao Xia knelt on the ground respectfully and kowtowed. "Xia thanks City Lord. I don't need to thank you for your kindness. In the future, Xia's life will be yours. As long as you need it, Xia will definitely work hard for you." Li Yueming didn't deny it and just waved his hand. "Go, remember, you can't tell anyone about this." Even if Li Yueming had only lightly reminded her not to spread the idea of granting temporary reincarnation authority to eliminated people, Zhao Xia could figure out the pros and cons of doing so with just a little thought. Chapter 746, Buying a New One to Increase His Strength. 1. After sending Zhao Xia away, Li Yueming did not waste any time. He closed his eyes and continued to digest his various powers. So far, he had basically completed the control of his body. He only needed to make the final adjustments before he could start the next step of intensive training. Time passed day by day. A week later, Zhao Xia led more than 10 Star Moon City officers who had entered the fragment world to the city lord's mansion. She reported to Li Yueming that the phase in the fragment world had been collected. Li Yueming was not stingy either. After checking that there were no mistakes, he rewarded each of them with a bag of spiritual rice and some vegetables and fruits. One had to know that Li Yueming's crops were all high-grade goods. These spiritual rice, vegetables, and fruits were luxury items even for weaker ordinary reincarnators. However, to Li Yueming, they were just items that he casually gave to his subordinates. Therefore, following a leader was very important. The group of people left happily after receiving the reward. Li Yueming was left alone in the city lord's mansion. He thought about it. He was prepared to sell all the insights he gained from the fragment world this time, along with the reincarnation points that he had not finished trading last time. He would use the reincarnation points he obtained to trade for the various secret manuals he needed. After all, ever since he found out the truth about the reincarnation mark, Li Yueming's heart had never been at ease. For others, the prime material plane might be a good place to hide. However, to him, whether it was the reincarnation world or the prime material world, they could only be considered as the moon in the mirror. If he was not careful, it would be a vain joy. After all, from a certain perspective, the reincarnation mark. It was set up for him alone. The others could seek asylum. He was the only one who could not escape and had to bear this responsibility. It was also because of this that Li Yueming lamented that sometimes knowing too much and shouldering too much wasn't a good thing. Wearing a crown and being crowned as the king could still gain the respect and supreme rights of the people, but he did not gain any right to do whatever he wanted, nor did he gain anyone's surprise and respect. He could only bear everything he faced alone. There were many hardships among the reincarnators. But someone like him was probably the first. There were less than 2.5 months left until the ultimate assessment in the reincarnation mark's notification. As the date gradually approached, Li Yueming became more and more nervous. Logically speaking, it was just an assessment, so it shouldn't have brought him so much psychological pressure. However, his intuition told him that it was definitely not that simple. Forcefully suppressing the chaotic thoughts in his mind, Li Yueming entered the Reincarnator Forum and walked around. After listening to the recent news for a while, he did not stay for long. He went straight to the Administrator Group and the Cloud Maple Leaf Group chats to sell. There was no lack of additional reincarnation rights in the Administrator Group chats. After all, be it Fu Dalong or Su Yu, they were both top-notch reincarnators. In addition, they had additional authority over the reincarnation mark. It was impossible for them not to have additional authority over the reincarnation mark. Therefore, Li Yueming still sold the reincarnation authority in the group chats of Maple Leaf in the Cloud as usual. It was still the young masters of the big cities and the families behind them who needed the extra reincarnation authority more. As expected, the remaining 10 or so reincarnations were all swept away by Yunduan Fengjai and the others. Now, Li Yueming was about to become a super rich person in the group who created additional reincarnation rights. Qin Rishan and the others had never seen anyone like Li Yueming. The additional reincarnation authority was like a cabbage in the market. As for the remaining spiritual items, Li Yueming thought about it and didn't continue to trade in the group chats. Instead, he switched to the administrator group chats. After all, this thing was different from the additional reincarnation authority. It was not a hard resource. Moreover, the spiritual rice, vegetables, and fruits planted by Li Yueming were all the most expensive varieties that could be bought on the market. Now that they had finally obtained a harvest, they naturally had to look for a big dog if they wanted to sell them for a high price. Without a doubt, in this aspect, Su Yuefu, Dalong, and the other city lords were the first choice. Therefore, Li Yueming happily tagged everyone in the group chats and said, "At all members, sell some spiritual rice and spiritual melons produced in your spiritual fields. The varieties are not bad compared to the group chats of maple leaf in the clouds." Although there would occasionally be people chatting in the group chats, most of the time, it was relatively quiet. After all, the people in this group were all big shots. Even though they were all busy, they definitely did not have the time and mood to chat with Faded Cloud Maple Leaf and the other rich second-generation heirs. After seeing his message, the administrators in the group suddenly popped up. Fu Dalong said, "Yes, the spiritual rice and fruits produced in Duren's spiritual fields? This is incredible. I'll reserve a portion for you, thank you." Li Fuwen, "Lord Li, you're in such a good mood. You actually have the time to plant spiritual plants yourself. I'll order one too." "Good day, Lord Li. I'll naturally order a portion of the spiritual rice and fruits that you planted personally. Fu Wen Tao, the adults are raising the fruits very well. I wonder what methods they used to cultivate them? I'll share it with you. I'll try it out when I have time." The 10 administrators in the group chats basically all popped up. They all expressed their intention to reserve a portion of the fei. Chapter 747, Buying a new one to increase his strength. 2. However, Li Yueming was a high-level administrator. Anyone with a brain would not give Li Yueming face when it came to such matters. However, even so, the group of people still had some doubts in their hearts. Li Yueming was already a high-level administrator. Logically speaking, even if their status in the main material world was temporarily inferior to theirs, it should not be much lower. During this period of time, in order to understand Li Yueming's true identity. In fact, the various city lords had already launched an intelligence network to search for city lords with the surname Li in some first-tier cities and second-tier cities in order to be able to build a relationship with Li Yueming faster. However, they had paid a considerable price, but no city lord who met their expectations had appeared. Coupled with the fact that Li Yueming was selling spiritual rice and fruits in the group chats. Could it be that Li Yueming was not a second-tier city lord, but an unremarkable ordinary reincarnator? This was impossible. To be able to obtain an SSS level score, which one of them wasn't a dragon among men? Even if he didn't climb to the top, he shouldn't be unknown. It could only be said that Li Ming's identity had been shrouded in a mess in the eyes of many city lords. If Li Yueming didn't take the initiative to reveal some information to them, they probably wouldn't be able to find any clues no matter how much manpower and material resources they invested. But would Li Yueming reveal more information? Obviously, not for the time being. Of course, he couldn't hide forever. As long as he wanted to participate in the planning of the prime material plane, he couldn't avoid these 10 city lords. Therefore, sooner or later, Li Yueming would definitely come into close contact with them. The reason why he was so mysterious was that he had to hide his true strength before he could master it. After all, although he did have the authority of a high-level administrator, he could only make a ruling based on the rules. The human heart was like water. No one could guarantee that if his true strength was exposed in front of this group of top-notch reincarnators, it would not cause some unnecessary trouble. Only when his fist was strong enough to settle everything with his own strength would Li Yueming be able to show his face in front of them openly. Therefore, when he saw someone in the group chats asking for information about him in a roundabout manner, Li Yueming remained silent and didn't answer at all. He just silently put up the phase he wanted to sell. Seeing that he didn't say anything, some people didn't dare to continue asking. He was afraid of angering Li Yueming. There weren't too many fancy things. The phase collected in the fragment world were sold for more than 1 million reincarnation points. Actually, according to the market price, the phase added up should be around 800,000 to 900,000. However, it was still the same sentence. Who asked Li Yueming to be a senior administrator? Even though he was bidding according to the market price, this group of people still paid him more reincarnation points for various reasons such as good plants, good varieties and good taste. As for whether it was true or not, that would depend on one's opinion. Li Yueming couldn't care less. After all, he couldn't possibly reject the money that the other party was rushing to give him, right? Now he finally understood why some people found it hard to resist temptation. It was really a willful act with little power. After tasting the sweetness, it went out of control. After trading all the tradable items in his hand, Li Yueming once again obtained more than 2 million reincarnation points. Adding on the remaining reincarnation points from before, it was a total of 5 million. Li Yueming made a rough estimate. These reincarnation points might be equivalent to the savings of some small reincarnator families for a few years. To ordinary reincarnators, this was definitely a huge sum of money. Only the city lords of first-tier and second-tier cities could easily take out so many reincarnation points. He looked at the 7-digit balance in the reincarnation mark. Li Yueming pondered for a moment. He decided to head to the Reincarnator Forum to participate in the auction. He had bought the personal secret manuals from Wang Linlin the last few times. But this time, he needed a lot of secret manuals. Wang Linlin probably wouldn't be satisfied. In order not to make things difficult for her, Li Yueming decided to go to the Reincarnator Forum to take a look after considering for a moment. Of course, the main reason was that Li Yueming had now become a proper authority dog. Not only did he not have to pay additional transaction taxes when he went to the Reincarnator Forum to buy resources, but he could also use his authority to punish any reincarnator who wanted to cheat him of his reincarnation points. With such a huge advantage, if he did not make use of it, he would really be letting down the painstaking efforts of the Reincarnator Authority. Thinking of this, Li Yueming did not hesitate. He left the administrator group chats and returned to the Reincarnator Forum. The forum was still bustling. This was because the invasion of the dark energy had been severe over the years. Reincarnators usually had to guard their own cities and rarely walked around. The city lords of the large cities were still fine. The cities might recruit dozens of reincarnators to guard the cities together. However, the city lords of small cities like Li Yueming were in a more difficult situation. He had no one of his own to vent his emotions, nor could he communicate with his subordinates. Therefore, he could only spend all day on the Reincarnator Forum. This was also the reason why the Reincarnator Forum was always lively. FRVM. After all, reincarnators were also humans. They also had emotions. They could not vent them in the real world, so they could only complain on the forum. Chapter 748, Buying a New One to Increase His Strength. 3. He immediately scrolled through the post and found the Reincarnator stall section. With a thought, he clicked on it. Suddenly, a familiar yet strange feeling appeared in front of Li Yueming. How should he describe this feeling? It was as if he had returned home. Long-term seller of technology-related secret books. Handsome and good character. Buyers with technology reincarnators can chat privately. Spiritual rice for sale, spiritual rice for sale. I don't want 998, I don't want 98, I only want 9.8. Take 1 jin of spiritual rice home. Chat service is provided. I am 170 centimeters tall and have a face value of 9 points or above. I can cosplay as a fairy from the Xiangxia world, a witch from the martial arts world, a chivalrous woman, a cat girl from the spirit beast world, a bunny girl. He only needed 998 reincarnation points to chat with her for an entire day. Among all kinds of exaggerated and ridiculous headlines, Li Yueming picked the last one at a glance. After subconsciously opening the last post related to chatting, Li Yueming was surprised to find that there were a few photos of the female reincarnators taking selfies under the thread. All kinds of nosebleed-inducing large-scale photos made Li Yueming dizzy. He did not expect that this group of reincarnators. You're playing quite well. They could even openly sell their chat services. Li Yueming almost couldn't help but feel his blood rush up. Fortunately, his willpower was still firm. Otherwise, he would have forgotten what he was here for. He closed the post with great willpower. Li Yueming continued reading. He finally found what he was looking for among the dazzling posts. Selling personal strength cultivation techniques and secret manuals. Those with guaranteed character can chat privately. He opened the post. Li Yueming took a glance. All of them were indeed secret manuals of personal strength cultivation techniques. However, most of them were trash worth tens of thousands. Only a handful of them were more expensive, and the introduction of the technique was quite unique. Name: Apocalypse. Type: World of Martial Arts Cultivation Method. Description: Level 5 Martial Arts World's top-notch cultivation technique. By circulating the cultivation technique to compress the true essence in the body, it will obtain extremely powerful destructive power when it explodes. When cultivated to the extreme, it will not be weaker than ordinary Xiangxia or fantasy cultivation techniques. Remarks: The destructive power of this cultivation technique is directly related to the level of one's energy. It is not limited like ordinary martial arts manuals, so it is extremely rare. Price: 800,000 reincarnation points. Turtle breathing technique. Type: Xiangxia World Secret Manual. Description: Level 2 Xiangxia World's ordinary cultivation method. By adjusting one's breathing, one can increase one's lifespan. When cultivated to the extreme, one can have a long lifespan like an old turtle. Not only that, but practicing this technique could also extend the diving time, making you as durable as a turtle, well, although it was useless. Remarks: Although this cultivation method is not precious, it is produced in the Xiangxia world and is directly linked to one's lifespan. It can be considered an extremely rare item. Price: 800,000. Heavenly Gate 13 Blades. Type: Fantasy World Cultivation Technique. Details: Level 3 Fantasy World Cultivation Technique. It is suitable for personal power reincarnators who like to use knives. When cultivated to the extreme, they can slash 13 times in a row in an extremely fast time. Each slash has extremely destructive power. Remarks: It is said that this cultivation technique was originally called the 12 Blades of Heaven's Gate. The founder was a world-famous demon in a certain fantasy world. He once used this cultivation technique to kill hundreds of famous experts in one night. The reincarnators had gone through a lot of hardships and gathered tens of thousands of righteous people to barely suppress him. Before the demon lord died, he sublimated this saber technique, which was why there was this 13th saber technique. I racked my brains to make up such a story with a beginning and an end. It's not too much to sell it for an extra 80,000, right? Price: 108,000. He looked at the introduction of the various cultivation techniques in the post. Although some of the sellers made up ridiculous stories, to be honest, it was difficult for any reincarnator not to be tempted. However, the price. All of them were rather touching. Li Yueming glanced at his 5 million yuan. These reincarnation points were probably enough for ordinary reincarnators who did not have any pursuits to lie flat for a lifetime. However, it didn't seem to be much for Li Yueming. After all, his personal growth was inseparable from the nourishment of those high-level secret manuals, and those secret manuals that could be cultivated in the prime material plane were not cheap. Just this expenditure alone was a bottomless pit that could never be satisfied. Not to mention that there was a world fragment consciousness behind him. This guy opened his mouth and shut his mouth. Even if it was just a small ball of broken world origin, it would cost more than 500,000 reincarnation points at a 50% discount. The price of a complete world origin was even more unimaginable. If he didn't think of ways to earn some money, he probably wouldn't even be able to maintain his basic living expenses. Shaking her head, Li Yueming quickly pulled herself together. Although his rapid growth was at the cost of burning money crazily. But how many people could not grow even if they wanted to burn money? Now that he saw the various top-notch secret manuals in the post, Li Yueming only hated that his reincarnation points could not have another zero. After getting rid of the distracting thoughts in his mind, Li Yueming once again carefully read the information of the cultivation technique manuals in the post from beginning to end, focusing on those that were priced at more than 500,000 yuan. There was no doubt that whether it was Apocalypse, Turtle Breathing Technique, or the 13 Blades of Heaven's Gate, they were all within his scope of choice. Chapter 749, When the Darkness Breaks, the Dawn Finally Appears. 1. Currently, Li Yueming still had 5 million reincarnation points. It should be enough to buy these cultivation technique manuals. After thinking for a while, Li Yueming clicked on the contact information on the merchant's homepage and asked through private chat, "Are you there?" He used 10 directions annihilation, turtle breathing technique, heavenly gate 13 blades, gale grass force, and so on. Could you give me a discount for the cultivation technique manuals of several high-level worlds? After sending the message, the seller waited for a while before replying, "Who are you sending it to? Are you kidding me? These few cultivation techniques are the best treasures I've obtained through painstaking efforts. All of them cost nearly 3 million reincarnation points. You, an empty level 0 buyer, dare to ask?" Li Yueming was stunned. Only then did he realize that perhaps because the question he asked was rather ridiculous, he was directly treated as a troublemaker by the seller. Before he could explain, the other side continued, "I'm warning you not to get around for nothing. Otherwise, our merchant can blacklist your ID. If you can't buy anything in the trading market, don't cry." If it were an ordinary person, they would have been furious after being reprimanded and threatened like this. However, Li Yueming was obviously not an ordinary person. First of all, he did not have any transaction records in the trading market. It was a pure white account, so it was normal for the seller to think that he was looking for trouble. Secondly, just as the seller said, the secret manuals in his hands were all rare treasures. If it was any other shop, they might not have such an item that suited Li Yueming's taste. In summary, Li Yueming finally chose to calm down and explain, 3 million reincarnation points, right? I can verify the balance in my account for you. After confirming that there's no problem, we can continue talking. He replied very quickly. After a moment of silence, the seller said doubtfully, "Really? Show me. If it's fake, I'll blacklist your ID and inform the others in the industry. Think carefully." Without hesitation, Li Yueming sent a screenshot of his account balance to the seller. This thing was similar to some auction houses. In order to prevent those bored guys from causing trouble, they needed to prepare a capital verification report in advance. After the screenshot was sent, the other party was silent for a long time before finally saying, "I'm sorry, I didn't recognize Mount Tai." "Boss, do you really want to pack these 6 cultivation technique manuals? Even if you're a senior reincarnator in the martial arts world, you shouldn't be able to use so many high-level cultivation technique manuals," right? Moreover, these cultivation techniques of mine not only include martial arts, xiangxia, but also a very small number of fantasy techniques. It's probably difficult for you to digest so many of them. Under normal circumstances. Although the cultivation techniques and secret manuals of the individual power side had their own similarities. However, there were still many differences. Therefore, many individual reincarnators of the magnificent power realm would also have their own cultivation system that they specialized in. Even if it was compatible with the cultivation techniques of other types of worlds, only a very small number of talented reincarnators could enjoy it. Moreover, it was very likely that they would need to put in more effort and time than this type of cultivation technique to achieve the desired effect. This was also why reincarnators who mainly cultivated the physical body were more inclined to buy martial arts or fantasy cultivation technique manuals, while reincarnators who mainly cultivated the laws were more inclined to buy xiangxia cultivation technique manuals. People like Li Yueming who wanted to pack 3 top-notch cultivation technique manuals at the beginning were simply impossible to appear except for the big spenders or the leaders of some large forces who bought them in bulk. Li Yueming's account was a blank slate without any extra information, so it was naturally impossible for him to be the leader of a large force. The seller was also apologizing for not recognizing Mount Tai before, so he reminded him. Hearing the reminder, Li Yueming smiled and replied, "Thank you for your kindness, but I'm indeed interested in these 6 cultivation techniques. If it's convenient, please give me a fair price. If it's suitable, I'll take them all away." Li Yueming insisted. The seller didn't say anything else. After waiting for about 2 minutes, he deliberated and reported the price to Li Yueming. "Among the few cultivation techniques that you want, the most expensive one should be the 13 Blades of the Heavenly Gate. Although I'm somewhat bragging about this cultivation technique, there's actually no need for me to say more about its preciousness. The fantasy world and the immortal world were known as the 2 great graves of reincarnators. It was already very difficult for ordinary reincarnators to enter such worlds and ensure that they did not die. It was even more difficult to obtain results, especially for top-notch cultivation techniques like the Heavenly Gate 13 Blades. This cultivation technique is priced at 1,080,000 reincarnation points. I can directly round it off and give you 1 million reincarnation points. As for the later turtle breathing technique, it is also produced in a xiangxia world. Although the characteristics of the technique itself are ordinary, it involves a core element that the reincarnators cannot reject, and that is lifespan. Although reincarnators have long lifespans, they are ultimately not immortal. If you want to live a few more years and change your fate, the more cultivation techniques you have to increase your lifespan, the better. Chapter 750, When the Darkness Breaks, the Dawn Finally Appears. 2. As for that 10 Directions Annihilation, it's an extremely destructive martial arts secret technique. Its power is at the level of a trump card. You should also know how terrifying the increase in the combat strength of a reincarnator is with an additional cultivation technique like this. Therefore, the price can only be reduced by 50,000 yuan, 750,000 yuan. At this point, the seller paused. Then, he continued to introduce, the other 3 cultivation technique manuals also have their own strengths. However, compared to the value of these 3 cultivation techniques, they can only be considered as an addition at most. I won't elaborate too much. The 6 secret manuals add up to a total of 3.3 million reincarnation points. I wonder if you think this price is fair. As expected of a professional businessman, he could recite the strengths of every cultivation technique manual backwards. He was even more skilled in business. However, Li Yueming wasn't stupid enough to agree. 3.3 million reincarnation points was not expensive, but it was definitely not fair. After thinking for a while, Li Yueming retorted, "The Heavenly Gate 13 Blades is indeed a high-tier cultivation technique, but it's not the most kingly type, right? Moreover, there was still a threshold to cultivate this cultivation method. One had to be extremely proficient in the Dao of Saber in order to be able to play a role like adding wings to a tiger. Ordinary reincarnators probably won't be able to understand it even if they buy it. Hearing Li Yueming's reply, the seller immediately knew that Li Yueming was not easy to fool, but he still stubbornly said, "The King Dao cultivation technique is not something that can be obtained at this price. As for the threshold of the cultivation technique, indeed, in the eyes of ordinary reincarnators, this specialized cultivation technique was indeed tasteless and a pity to throw it away. But from another perspective, if you encounter a sword cultivator reincarnator who suits your appetite, wouldn't this cultivation technique be more competitive than other cultivation techniques? It's not that I want to raise the price, but 1 million reincarnation points is really the limit price I can offer." The seller's words were extremely sincere. However, Li Yueming was not moved at all. He said directly, "In that case, it's a pity that I'm not a sword cultivator. It seems that this cultivation technique is destined to be fated with me." Shopkeeper, continue to wait for the fated person. Seeing that Li Yueming didn't dawdle, the seller had already roughly figured out Li Yueming's background. Although the information he had just said was indeed true. However, in business, it was impossible to survive if one only told the truth or lies. Half-truths were the way to go. The Heavenly Gate 13 Blades was indeed a rare top-notch sword cultivation technique. However, the number of reincarnators who specialized in saber techniques was pitifully small. And the 13 Blades of the Heavenly Gate was so expensive. Those who wanted to buy it did not have money, and those who had money mostly already had similar exclusive cultivation techniques. He had been hoarding this cultivation method for almost half a year, but he still hadn't sold it. If they continued to hoard, it would be difficult to not lose money, let alone make money. It wasn't easy to meet a hothead like Li Yueming. The seller originally wanted to make a little profit, but now it seemed that he was already burning incense and praying to Buddha if he could keep his losses. After weighing the pros and cons, the seller gritted his teeth and said, "I'll drop another 50,000 reincarnation points. 950,000, I really can't drop any more." At this moment, Li Yueming was certain that the seller wanted to make a move, so he said unhurriedly, "Didn't I say that I'm really not a sword cultivator? This item is not fated with me." Seeing that he was still unmoved, the seller could only say with hatred, 900,000. This is really the lowest price. If you still don't want it, I can only continue to wait for the fated person." Hearing this, Li Yueming roughly estimated in his heart and finally nodded. "In that case, deal." Seeing how he was suddenly so happy, the seller immediately realized that he had been tricked. He almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Suppressing the urge to burst into tears, the seller was determined to regain some face with the next item, so he continued to ask, "Then what about the turtle breathing technique? Do you still want it?" Li Yueming used both his hands to defend himself and said indifferently, "Yes, why not? However, this price." The seller immediately said bitterly, "Boss, there's really no way to lower the price." Li Yueming seemed to have known that he would say this, so he said, "This turtle breathing technique is indeed not bad. However, this side effect, how many people would be willing to turn themselves into a turtle for a technique?" The seller was speechless. In the introduction of the cultivation technique, he emphasized the effect of turtle breathing technique on increasing lifespan. As for the side effect of becoming abnormally slow after cultivation, he had infinitely reduced it or even ignored it. Now that Li Yueming had exposed him, he could only say awkwardly, "I'll lower your bid by another 100,000 yuan. After the first few tit-for-tat battles. After realizing that Li Yueming wasn't an ignorant noob, the subsequent transaction was smoother. As long as Li Yueming picked out the flaws, the seller didn't refute much and directly showed the starting price that he could accept. After several discussions, the original business of 3 million reincarnation points was finally cut down to 2,900,000 by Li Yueming. In the end, under the boss's tears, Li Yueming even gave him an auspicious number. Final transaction price, 28,888,888 reincarnation points. After negotiating the price, he decisively paid. Although the seller wondered why Li Yueming was so generous and dared to pay before seeing the goods, he did not play any tricks and sent all 6 cultivation techniques to Li Yueming's email. After all, although there were many scammers in the Reincarnator forum, there were still many people who were not willing to accept it. However, as long as they were not greedy and traded with legitimate merchants, the probability of stepping on a scam was not high. However, this made Li Yueming a little disappointed. He wanted the seller to keep his reincarnation points for himself, so he could give him a self-righteous 0 yuan purchase. However, the boss actually resisted the temptation and did not give him any leverage. After completing the transaction, Li Yueming opened his mailbox and took out 6 cultivation technique manuals to check one by one. Even though he had already slashed the boss's neck. However, this transaction still cost him more than half of the reincarnation points he had saved up. It could only be said that the infinite deduction talent and the constantly improving star moon art were truly a bottomless pit that could not be filled. Every step of the path of taking the strengths of hundreds of schools and completing one's own body had to be paved with white money. Of course, he had spent so many reincarnation points. Li Yueming's gains were also extremely huge. Whether it was the 10 Directions Annihilation or the Heavenly Gate 13 Blades, they were both top-notch cultivation techniques that sold for nearly 1 million yuan each. Even in a small or medium-sized reincarnator family, these laws were even qualified to be used as a family treasure. Most of the cultivation techniques he had bought from Wang Linlin were products of small and medium-sized worlds. In terms of rarity and preciousness, they were not even worthy of carrying shoes for these top-tier cultivation techniques. Absorbing the essence of these cultivation techniques could not only further improve the star moon art, but also further deepen Li Yueming's understanding of the strengths of the various worlds, greatly improving Li Yueming's strength. After checking the cultivation technique manuals in his hands, he did not find any problems. Li Yueming got up and sat cross-legged again. He began to use his infinite deduction talent to absorb the essence within. Time passed day by day. In the midst of the boring cultivation, Li Yueming could clearly feel that the star moon art was becoming more and more perfect. As long as he put in a little more effort, he reckoned that before the start of the next final assessment, the star moon art would be able to become its own, and become the foundation of his ultimate existence. At that time, even if there was no personal power order in the unknown reincarnation world. With the self-contained star moon arts, Li Yueming could continue his legend of individual power according to the world's environment. In a sense, this should be the ultimate goal that many reincarnators pursued together. Countless people had fallen on the road to cross the river. Only Li Yueming and a few other people could make it to the end and see the most beautiful moment of dawn. It took about a month. Li Yueming had almost deduced the 6 top-notch secret techniques of the individual power side. What he needed to do next was to integrate the theoretical essence into the star moon art. After completing this task, he would then be able to calmly face the so-called ultimate test of the rebirth mark.